The day Claire Monroe arrived at Noah Bennett's farm, she was running from more than just poverty. She was running for her life. Accused of a crime she didn't commit by one of the most powerful families in town, she had nowhere left to turn. Noah, a widowed father barely holding his own world together, made a choice that would change everything. He let her stay. What he didn't know was that his act of kindness would ignite a battle against wealth, lies, and small-town cruelty that would threaten to destroy them all. This is their story. If you're watching, drop a comment with your city below. I want to see how far this journey reaches. And if you stay until the end, you'll witness something powerful. Proof that family isn't always blood, and home isn't always where you start. It's where you're finally brave enough to fight. The fence post cracked under Noah's hammer just as the autumn wind picked up, sending dried leaves skittering across the north pasture like scattered prayers. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cold, and looked out over the land that had been in his family for 3 generations. 40 acres of stubborn Missouri clay, a farmhouse that creaked in its sleep, and a daughter who deserved better than a father who was just barely keeping it together. That was Noah Bennett at 34, a man who had learned to measure his life in small victories. Getting Emma to school on time, fixing the tractor before it died completely, making it through bedtime stories without his voice breaking when he reached the parts about mothers and happy endings. It had been 4 years since Sarah died. 4 years since the cancer took her in increments, piece by piece, until the woman he'd married was just a whisper in a hospital bed, squeezing his hand and making him promise to be strong for their little girl. He'd kept that promise the only way he knew how, by working himself numb, by building routines so solid they could substitute for hope, by pretending that exhaustion and purpose were the same thing. The October afternoon was dying early, the way it always did this time of year, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and cold gold. Noah had maybe an hour of good light left. The water trough near the back fence had been acting up all week, and the cattle were getting restless. He loaded his tools into the bed of his ancient Ford pickup, the one that ran more on prayer than gasoline, and headed down the dirt road that cut through his property like a scar. He was halfway to the fence line when he saw her. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow that didn't belong, a shape too vertical to be natural among the horizontal sprawl of fence posts and wire. But as the truck bounced closer over the rutted path, the shadow resolved into a woman, standing at his gate with one hand gripping the rusted metal like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Noah's foot hit the brake instinctively. The truck lurched to a stop, sending tools clattering in the bed. The woman didn't move. She just stood there, swaying slightly, her clothes hanging off her frame like they'd been made for someone else. Someone healthier. Someone who hadn't missed too many meals. Noah killed the engine and climbed out slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. Living alone with a 6-year-old daughter had made him cautious about strangers, but it had also taught him to recognize desperation when he saw it. And this woman, whoever she was, had desperation written into every line of her body. "Can I help you?" he called out, staying near the truck. Her head lifted. Even from 20 feet away, Noah could see the exhaustion in her face, the hollow shadows under her eyes, the way her lips were cracked and bloodless. She looked like she'd been walking for days. Maybe she had. "Are you Noah Bennett?" Her voice was hoarse, barely louder than the wind. "I am." He took a step closer, his hand resting unconsciously on the truck bed, ready for anything. "Do I know you?" "No." She shook her head, and the movement seemed to cost her something. "But I know who you are. Everyone in town knows who you are. The farmer who keeps to himself, the one who doesn't gossip, the one who—" She trailed off, her eyes dropping to the ground. "The one who might not turn me away." Noah's chest tightened. He recognized her now. Not personally, but the way you recognize someone you've seen around town without ever really looking at them. She'd worked at Millie's Diner on Main Street. He'd seen her there a handful of times over the years, usually when he had to pick up supplies and Emma begged for pancakes. Always in the background, always moving, always quiet. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Claire." She lifted her eyes again, and Noah saw something there that cut right through his carefully constructed defenses. A kind of hollow courage that came from having absolutely nothing left to lose. "Claire Monroe." "Claire." He repeated it like he was trying to place her in the geography of his memory. "From the diner." Used to be. Her laugh was bitter and short. I don't work there anymore. I don't work anywhere anymore. I don't. She stopped, her throat working like the words were caught somewhere painful. I have nowhere else to go. The wind picked up again, colder now, carrying the smell of distant rain. Claire shivered, wrapping her arms around herself, and Noah made a decision that he'd spend the next several months questioning, defending, and ultimately never regretting. Come on up to the house, he said, pulling his keys from his pocket. Let's get you warm and figure this out. I'm not looking for charity, Claire said quickly, her spine straightening despite the exhaustion. I can work. I'm good with my hands. I can clean, cook, help with the animals. Whatever you need. I just need... Her voice cracked. I just need somewhere safe. Safe. The word hung in the air between them like a confession. Noah studied her for a long moment, weighing responsibility against compassion, caution, against the simple human recognition of someone drowning within arm's reach. He thought about Emma, asleep in her bed every night, believing the world was basically good because her father had worked so hard to make it seem that way. He thought about Sarah, who had never once turned away someone in need, who had driven their neighbors' kids to school and brought meals to the elderly and volunteered at the church, even when she was too sick to stand. He thought about the man he'd been trying to be since she died, solid, dependable, safe, and the man he was afraid he'd become instead, closed off, isolated, surviving instead of living. Get in the truck, he said finally. We'll talk at the house. Relief crashed across Claire's face so violently that she actually stumbled, her knees buckling. Noah moved without thinking, catching her elbow before she could fall, feeling how light she was, how fragile, like a bird made of hollow bones and desperate hope. When's the last time you ate? He asked, but he already knew the answer from the way she swayed against his arm. I don't remember, she whispered. Noah helped her into the passenger seat of the truck, catching the scent of rain-damp clothes and something else underneath, fear maybe, or the particular exhaustion that came from running on nothing but willpower. He closed the door carefully and walked around to the driver's side, his mind already racing through the logistics. There was leftover chicken from dinner, bread in the freezer. The spare room upstairs hadn't been touched since Sarah's sister visited 2 years ago, but the sheets would be clean. The truck rumbled to life, and Noah pointed it back toward the farmhouse, visible now in the distance, white clapboard siding that needed paint, a sagging front porch, windows glowing yellow where he'd left the kitchen light on for Emma. They drove in silence, the only sound the rattle of the truck's loose exhaust and the crunch of gravel under tires. Noah glanced over once and saw Claire staring straight ahead, her hands folded in her lap so tightly her knuckles had gone white. I need to know, he said quietly, keeping his eyes on the road, if I'm going to be expecting trouble by helping you. Claire was silent for so long that Noah thought she might not answer. Then, just as the house came fully into view, she spoke. Yes, she said simply, you probably will. It was the honesty that decided him, not the plea for help or the desperation or even the haunted look in her eyes. It was the fact that she could have lied, could have downplayed or deflected or promised him that everything would be fine, but instead she'd told him the truth. Noah pulled the truck up to the house and killed the engine. Through the kitchen window, he could see Mrs. Patterson, the neighbor who watched Emma after school, moving around making dinner. His daughter would be in the living room, probably sprawled on the floor with her coloring books, humming to herself in that off-key way that made his heart hurt with love. All right, he said, turning to face Claire fully. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to come inside, eat something, and rest. Tomorrow morning, you're going to tell me exactly what kind of trouble we're talking about, and then we're going to figure out what to do about it. Does that work for you? Claire's eyes filled with tears, the first real emotion he'd seen break through the exhaustion. She nodded once, sharp and quick, like she was afraid if she moved too much, the moment would shatter. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, Noah said, but not unkindly. You haven't heard what I'm going to ask in return. He climbed out of the truck and walked around to open her door, offering his hand like his mother had taught him to do for women, back when manners mattered more than money, and a handshake still meant something. Claire took it, her fingers ice cold and trembling, and let him help her down from the cab. Mrs. Patterson looked up as they came through the kitchen door, her eyes going wide at the sight of Claire. Noah could already see the questions forming, the gossip taking shape, but he cut her off with a look and a tone that allowed no argument. "Martha, this is Claire. She's going to be staying with us for a while, helping out around the farm. Claire, this is Mrs. Patterson, our neighbor." To Martha's credit, she recovered quickly, her face smoothing into polite welcome even as her eyes stayed sharp and calculating. "Nice to meet you, dear. There's a plate in the oven if you're hungry." "Where's Emma?" Noah asked, already moving toward the living room. "Right where you left her. Been good as gold all afternoon." Martha gathered her purse and jacket, clearly dying to get home and call everyone she knew, but too well-mannered to pry directly. "I'll see you tomorrow, Noah." "Thanks, Martha. I appreciate it." The door closed behind her with a soft click, and then it was just Noah and Claire standing in his kitchen, the stranger he'd just invited into his home, into his daughter's life, based on nothing but instinct and a promise made 4 years ago to a dying woman about being the kind of person who helped. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the kitchen table. "I'll get you that plate." Claire sank into the chair like her strings had been cut, her whole body seeming to deflate now that she was finally, temporarily, safe. Noah pulled the plate from the oven, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans that Emma had pushed around her plate at dinner but hadn't actually eaten, and set it in front of her along with a glass of water. "Eat slowly," he warned. "If you haven't been eating regular, you'll make yourself sick." She nodded and picked up the fork, and Noah watched as she took the first bite, her eyes closing with something that looked almost like pain. Or relief. Maybe they were the same thing when you'd been hungry long enough. He left her there and walked into the living room, where Emma was indeed sprawled on the carpet, surrounded by a chaos of crayons and half-finished drawings. She looked up as he entered, her face splitting into the smile that made every impossible day worth surviving. "Daddy! I drawed you and me and the chickens!" "Drew, baby. You drew us." He knelt down beside her, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. "It's beautiful. You're getting really good." "Mrs. Patterson says I'm an artist." Emma beamed with pride, then cocked her head, listening. "Who's in the kitchen?" Noah took a slow breath, choosing his words carefully. "Her name is Claire. She's going to be staying with us for a little while, helping Daddy with the farm work. Is that okay with you?" Emma considered this with the seriousness of a child who'd learned early that sometimes adults needed help too, that sometimes the world was hard and people had to look out for each other. Her mother's daughter, through and through. "Is she nice?" Emma asked. "I think so, but you can decide for yourself. Come on, let's go meet her properly." He stood and offered Emma his hand, and together they walked back into the kitchen. Claire had made it halfway through the plate, eating with the kind of focused intensity that spoke to real hunger, but she looked up when they entered and something in her expression softened. "Claire, this is my daughter Emma. Emma, this is Miss Claire." "Hi," Emma said, suddenly shy, pressing against Noah's leg. "Hello, Emma." Claire's voice was gentler now, warmer. "Your daddy tells me you're an artist." Emma nodded, still uncertain, but Noah could see her natural curiosity winning out over caution. "I like to draw animals mostly. We have chickens and cows, and sometimes I draw the birds that sit on the fence. I'd love to see them sometime if that's okay with you." "Okay." Emma seemed to come to some internal decision, her small shoulders relaxing. "Are you going to live here now?" "Just for a little while, sweetheart. Just until I get back on my feet." Noah felt something twist in his chest at the phrasing, "back on my feet," like she'd been knocked down so hard she'd forgotten what standing felt like. "All right, Emma Bear, time for bed," he said, ruffling her hair. "Go brush your teeth. I'll be up in a minute for stories." Emma groaned the obligatory protest but obeyed, pausing at the doorway to give Claire one more long, evaluating look before disappearing up the stairs. Noah heard the bathroom door close, the water start running. He turned back to Claire, who was staring at her plate like it held answers to questions she was afraid to ask. "The spare room's upstairs, second door on the left. There's clean sheets on the bed, towels in the closet. Bathroom's shared, but Emma and I are pretty low maintenance." He paused, then added, "Lock on the door works if you want to use it. You're safe here, Claire. I need you to believe that." She looked up at him then, really looked at him, and Noah saw her measuring him the way he'd measured her at the gate. weighing truth against survival, hope against habit. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've done or why people—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "Why I had to leave." Noah pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, his farmer's hands folded on the table between them. "My wife used to say that you can tell everything you need to know about a person in the first 30 seconds of meeting them. Not what they say, but how they carry themselves. Whether they look you in the eye, whether they're honest about their desperation or try to hide it." He smiled, sad and small. "You told me I'd probably have trouble for helping you. You could have lied. You didn't. That tells me enough." "Your wife," Claire said carefully. "Emma's mother. Is she, She died 4 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry." "Me too." Noah stood, pushing the chair back. "Finish eating. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll talk about what you need and what I expect in return. Fair trade, Claire. No charity, just work. That's what you said you wanted, right?" "Right." She nodded, and some of the tension finally eased from her shoulders. "Fair trade." Noah left her there and climbed the stairs to where Emma was waiting in her bedroom, already in her pajamas, her favorite book clutched in her hands, the one about the little girl who found a dragon in her backyard, and they became best friends. They'd read it so many times, the spine was cracked, and the pages were soft as cloth. He settled onto the edge of her bed, and Emma curled up against him the way she always did, her small, warm weight a reminder of every reason he kept going. "Daddy?" she asked as he opened the book. "Is Miss Claire sad?" Noah paused, looking down at his daughter's upturned face, at the concern there that was too old for 6 years old, too knowing. "Yeah, baby. I think she is." "Is that why she's staying with us, to be less sad?" "Something like that." Emma thought about this, her fingers playing with the hem of his shirt. "When Mommy died, you were sad for a really long time. And Mrs. Patterson and Uncle Jim and everyone tried to help, but you were still sad. But then one day you weren't as sad anymore. Do you think that will happen for Miss Claire?" Noah felt his throat tighten, amazed as always by his daughter's wisdom, her ability to see straight through to the truth of things. "I hope so, Emma Bear. I really hope so." "Me too. Being sad is hard." "It is. But you know what makes it better?" "What?" "Having people around who care. Having a home that feels safe. Having someone read you bedtime stories even when they're tired." He tickled her side gently, earning a giggle. "Now come on, let's see what happens to the dragon tonight." He read until Emma's breathing evened out and her eyes drifted closed, until she was fully asleep and dreaming of dragons and adventures and things that made sense in the way that only children's stories could. Then he carefully extracted himself, tucked the blankets around her, and stood in the doorway for a long moment just watching her sleep, this perfect small person who depended on him to make good decisions, to keep her safe, to build a world worth waking up to. Downstairs, the kitchen was dark, except for the light over the sink. Claire's plate was washed and drying in the rack, and through the window Noah could see the spare room light was on, a thin yellow rectangle in the darkness. He thought about going up, checking if she needed anything, but decided against it. She needed space, needed time to breathe and remember what it felt like to be somewhere she didn't have to run from. Instead, Noah walked out onto the front porch, letting the screen door close softly behind him. The night was cold and clear, stars scattered across the sky like spilled salt, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called out its lonely song. He sat down on the porch steps, the wood cold through his jeans, and let himself think about what he'd just done. Invited a stranger into his home, into his daughter's life, based on nothing but a gut feeling and a promise to a dead woman about being better than the world expected. Maybe it was reckless. Maybe Martha Patterson would have the whole town talking by morning. Maybe Claire's trouble would turn out to be more than he could handle, more than he should have taken on. But as Noah sat there in the dark, listening to the wind move through the empty fields and the old house settle around the weight of new life inside it, he felt something he hadn't felt in 4 long years. He felt like maybe, just maybe, he was finally doing more than just surviving. Inside, in the spare room with the clean sheets and the working lock, Claire Monroe lay in a real bed for the first time in 3 weeks, and cried as quietly as she could into the pillow. Not from sadness, though there was plenty of that. Not from fear, though she knew tomorrow would bring its own reckonings. She cried from relief, from the bone-deep, soul-shaking relief of being somewhere warm and safe, of eating real food, of meeting kindness where she'd expected suspicion. And underneath it all, threaded through the tears like a warning she couldn't quite silence, was the knowledge that this peace wouldn't last. That the people who'd driven her out of town, who'd destroyed her reputation and stolen her livelihood, who'd made it clear that she had no place in their perfect little world, they wouldn't stop just because she'd found shelter 20 miles outside the city limits. Lucas Hale didn't like loose ends. And Claire Monroe, survivor that she was, had made the mistake of being one. But tomorrow was tomorrow. Tonight, in this house that smelled like home and safety, with a good man downstairs who'd chosen to help her for no reason except that it was the right thing to do, Claire let herself have this one night of peace. She'd need it for everything that was coming. Outside, the wind picked up, and the old farmhouse creaked like it was settling in for a storm. In the kitchen, Noah's coffee cup sat forgotten on the counter. In Emma's room, a child dreamed of dragons. And in the spare room with the working lock, a woman who'd been running for too long finally, briefly, stopped. The night stretched out around them all, dark and deep and full of the kind of silence that comes before everything changes. Tomorrow, Noah would learn exactly what kind of trouble he'd invited into his carefully ordered life. Tomorrow, Claire would have to explain why the son of the town's most powerful family wanted her destroyed. Tomorrow, the battle lines would be drawn. But tonight, for just a few more hours, they had this: a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, 3 people learning to breathe in the same space, and the fragile, dangerous hope that sometimes kindness was enough. It would have to be. Because what was coming for them would test every bit of strength they had, every assumption about justice and power, and what it meant to stand your ground when the whole world wanted you to run. The story was just beginning, and none of them, not Noah with his quiet strength, not Claire with her desperate courage, not even Emma with her artist's eyes that saw truth where adults built lies, none of them were ready for what came next. But ready or not, morning was coming, and with it, the reckoning. Morning came too early, the way it always did on a farm. Noah was up before dawn, moving through the dark house with the practiced silence of a man who'd learned not to wake a sleeping child. He made coffee in the kitchen, the ancient percolator gurgling and hissing like it was personally offended by the hour, and stood at the window watching the sky turn from black to deep blue to the color of old bruises. The spare room upstairs was still dark. Claire hadn't made a sound since he'd heard her go up last night, and Noah found himself wondering if she'd actually slept, or just lay there counting the hours until sunrise, waiting for whatever came next. He was on his second cup when he heard the stairs creak. He didn't turn around, just called out quietly, "Coffee's fresh if you want some." Claire appeared in the doorway looking like she'd slept in her clothes, which she probably had. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot, and there were shadows under her eyes that no single night's rest could erase, but her spine was straight, and her chin was up. Whatever vulnerability she'd shown last night was locked away now behind a wall of determined composure. "Thank you." She poured herself a cup, cradling it in both hands like the warmth was something precious. "What time does Emma wake up?" "Usually around 7. School bus comes at 7:45. Noah finally turned to face her, leaning against the counter. "We've got about an hour before chaos hits. Figured that's a good time for you to tell me what I need to know." Claire nodded slowly, like she'd been expecting this. She pulled out a chair and sat down at the kitchen table, the same spot where she'd eaten last night, and Noah joined her, bringing the coffee pot between them. "Where do you want me to start?" she asked. "The beginning's usually good." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The beginning. All right." She took a long sip of coffee, gathering herself. "I've lived in this town my whole life. Born at County General, went to school here, worked at my parents' hardware store until they sold it and moved to Arizona 5 years ago. I'm 28 years old, and until about 3 months ago, I was nobody special. Just another waitress at Millie's diner, saving up money, trying to figure out what came next." Noah stayed quiet, letting her tell it her way. Lucas Hale came into the diner one night in July. Late shift, just him and a couple of his friends. You know the type, Money they didn't earn, attitudes they didn't deserve. They'd been drinking, making noise, being generally obnoxious, but that wasn't unusual. Half the town treats Millie's like their personal playground after 10 p.m. Claire's hands tightened around her mug. Lucas, he'd always been friendly enough before, tipped well, made small talk, but that night he was different, kept asking me when I got off work, if I wanted to go for a drive, if I knew how pretty I was. Noah felt something cold settle in his stomach. I turned him down, politely at first, then more firmly when he wouldn't take the hint. His friends thought it was hilarious, kept egging him on, and Lucas... She stopped, her jaw working. Lucas doesn't like being told no, especially not in front of an audience. What did he do? Nothing. That night, nothing. He left with his friends, and I thought that was the end of it. But the next day, 2 sheriff's deputies showed up at the diner asking for me. Said there'd been a complaint about missing money from the register. $200 gone, and the manager remembered I'd closed alone the night before. Noah's coffee had gone cold in his hands. They thought you stole it. They didn't just think it. Someone had planted evidence. Extra cash in my locker, exactly $200 in small bills. My manager, Pete, he wanted to give me the benefit of the doubt, but his hands were tied. The money was there, the books didn't balance, and I had closed alone. Claire's voice had gone flat, reciting facts like they'd happened to someone else. They fired me on the spot. No police charges because Pete didn't want the hassle, but everyone knew. Small town like this, you can't sneeze without 3 people saying bless you and 5 more asking if you're getting sick. Within a week, everyone knew Claire Monroe was a thief. But you weren't. No. But try proving that when the evidence says otherwise and the person who set you up is Lucas Hale. She met his eyes across the table. His father owns half the commercial real estate in town, sits on the town council, and plays golf with the sheriff every Sunday. The Hales have been important since before this place had paved roads. Who was going to believe a diner waitress over their golden boy? Noah thought about the town he avoided as much as possible, the one where everyone knew everyone else's business and old money talked louder than truth. He thought about the Hale family. He'd never met them personally, but he knew the name the way everyone knew it, spoken with a kind of reflexive deference that made his skin crawl. You confronted him, Noah said. It wasn't a question. Claire's smile was bitter. I waited outside his father's office building, asked him why he did it, what I'd done to deserve it. You know what he said? She didn't wait for Noah to answer. He said I'd embarrassed him, that I should have been grateful for the attention, that girls like me don't get opportunities like him every day, and if I was smart, I'd apologize and maybe he'd make the whole thing go away. Christ. I told him to go to hell. That was my second mistake. Claire set down her mug, her hands shaking slightly. 3 days later, I got evicted from my apartment. Landlord said I was behind on rent, which was a lie. But he was a friend of the Hale family, so what did it matter? I tried to stay with friends, but people are scared, Noah. The Hales can make life very difficult for anyone who crosses them. Doors started closing. Job applications went unanswered. The few people who'd believed me at first started avoiding eye contact in the grocery store. So you ran. I survived. There's a difference. She straightened her shoulders. I slept in my car for 2 weeks, picked up day labor when I could find it, tried to figure out a way forward that didn't involve leaving town completely. This is my home. Why should I be the one who has to leave? Noah understood that kind of stubbornness. He'd felt it himself after Sarah died, when well-meaning neighbors suggested he might want to sell the farm, move closer to town, make things easier. But easier wasn't the same as right, and running wasn't the same as healing. What changed? He asked. What made you come here yesterday? Claire looked away, and for the first time since she'd started talking, he saw real fear flicker across her face. Lucas found me. 2 nights ago, parked behind the old grain elevator where I'd been sleeping. He said this was my last chance to be reasonable, that he could make everything go back to normal if I just... She trailed off, but Noah didn't need her to finish. He could fill in the blanks well enough. Did he hurt you? He tried to. Claire's voice was steel now. I had a tire iron under the seat. Broke his nose, I think. Definitely bruised his ego. He left, but not before he told me that I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. that I had 48 hours to get out of the county, or he'd make sure everyone thought I'd done a lot worse than steal $200. Noah felt anger building in his chest, the hot, steady kind that had no quick outlet, that just sat there burning. And you believed him. Wouldn't you? The Hales own this town, Noah. They decide who gets hired and who gets fired, whose business thrives and whose fails. Lucas could ruin me 10 different ways, and nobody would lift a finger to stop him because nobody wants to be next. She met his eyes again. So yes, I believed him. And I knew I needed help, needed somewhere to go that wasn't public record, wasn't connected to anyone he could pressure or threaten. I remembered you from the diner. You'd come in sometimes with Emma, and you were always kind, quiet. You paid attention when people talked, actually listened, and everyone said you kept to yourself, didn't involve yourself in town politics. So I was a safe bet. You were the only bet I had left. Claire's composure finally cracked, her voice breaking on the last word. I'm sorry. I know that's not fair to you or Emma. I know I'm bringing trouble to your door. But I didn't have anywhere else to go, and I hoped, that maybe you'd understand what it's like to need help and have nowhere to turn. Noah was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she'd told him, weighing it against his responsibility to Emma, to the farm, to the carefully structured peace he'd built over 4 years of grief and survival. The smart thing would be to give Claire some money, maybe drive her to the next county, help her start over somewhere Lucas Hale's reach didn't extend. The smart thing would be to protect his daughter from whatever storm was coming. But Noah had learned something in the years since Sarah died. Sometimes the smart thing and the right thing weren't the same, and you had to choose which one you could live with. Here's what's going to happen, he said finally. You're going to stay. You're going to work. Nothing you're not comfortable with, just honest labor around the farm. You're going to help with Emma when needed, keep the house running, earn your place here fair and square. And when Lucas Hale or anyone else from his family shows up, because they will, we're going to deal with it together, as a unit. Claire stared at him like he'd just spoken a language she didn't understand. Noah, I know exactly what I'm doing. He stood up, refilling both their mugs with coffee that was probably strong enough to strip paint by now. My wife used to volunteer at the women's shelter in the next county. She'd come home and tell me stories that'd break your heart. Women with nowhere to go, trapped by men who thought power meant ownership. She'd say that the only thing worse than the abusers were the people who saw what was happening and looked away because it wasn't their problem. He set Claire's mug in front of her. I looked away once, let a neighbor's kid get taken by CPS when I could have spoken up about what was really going on. Told myself it wasn't my business. Turned out the foster home was worse than the situation he came from, and by the time anyone figured it out, the damage was done. I swore I'd never do that again. Never look away when someone needed help. This is different. This could actually hurt you. Most things worth doing carry some risk. Noah checked the clock on the wall, 6:45, which meant Emma would be stirring any minute. Now finish your coffee. When Emma comes down, we're going to have breakfast like a normal family, and then I'm going to show you around the farm, explain what needs doing. You're not a charity case here, Claire. You're an employee, maybe eventually a friend. But you're part of this household now, and we take care of our own. Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, nodding sharply. Thank you. I won't let you down. I know you won't. Noah heard footsteps on the stairs, Emma's distinctive shuffle thump as she came down in her mismatched socks. And Claire? When the time comes, when Lucas or his father or whoever shows up looking for trouble, I need you to trust me to handle it. Can you do that? She hesitated, then nodded again. I'll try. It would have to be enough. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her blonde hair sticking up in directions that defied physics. She stopped when she saw Claire at the table, and for a moment Noah saw his daughter calculating, deciding how to feel about this new normal. Then Emma smiled, shy but genuine, and patted over to Noah for her morning hug. Morning, Daddy. Morning, Miss Claire. Good morning, sweetheart. Noah kissed the top of her head. What do you want for breakfast? Can we have pancakes? Emma looked hopefully between her father and Claire. With the chocolate chips? Noah laughed. It's a school day, Em. How about regular pancakes and you can have chocolate chips on Saturday? But Miss Claire's here. We should celebrate. Emma's logic was unassailable in the way only a 6-year-old's could be. Claire spoke up quietly. I could make them, if that's all right. I worked at a diner for 3 years. I know my way around a griddle. Emma's eyes went wide. Really? Can you make them in shapes? Shapes, animals, letters, you name it. Claire stood up, and Noah saw some of the tension ease from her shoulders as she moved toward the stove, finding purpose in the familiar routine. What's your favorite animal? Chickens, because we have chickens, and they're funny when they run. Chicken pancakes it is. Noah watched as Claire found the flour and eggs without asking where they were kept, moving around his kitchen like she'd been doing it for years instead of hours. Emma sat at the table, chattering about school and her friend Madison, who could do a cartwheel in the science project they were supposed to start next week about the water cycle. It was so achingly normal that Noah felt something crack open in his chest. Not pain exactly, but the release of pressure he hadn't realized he'd been holding. This was what he'd been missing without knowing it. Not romance or companionship in the adult sense, but simply having another person to share the weight, to make breakfast while he packed Emma's lunch, to exist in the same space without it feeling empty. Dangerous thinking, that. Claire wasn't staying forever. She was running from something, and eventually she'd either face it or run further. Getting attached, letting Emma get attached, would only make the inevitable departure harder. But for now, in this kitchen, with morning light streaming through the windows and the smell of pancakes filling the air, Noah let himself pretend that maybe this could last. Emma ate her chicken-shaped pancakes with appropriate enthusiasm, syrup everywhere, while Claire picked at a single pancake with an expression of quiet contentment. Noah drank his third cup of coffee and mentally ran through the day's work. Fence posts to replace on the east pasture, the tractor's oil change that he'd been putting off, firewood to split before the real cold hit. Miss Claire? Emma asked between bites. Are you going to help Daddy with the farm stuff today? That's the plan. Your dad's going to show me around, teach me what needs doing. The chickens are the best part. You'll like them. Except for Henrietta, she's mean and pecks everybody. Emma spoke with the authority of hard-won experience. Oh, and we have a cow named Bessie, who's going to have a baby soon. Daddy says maybe around Christmas. Is that right? Claire looked at Noah with the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. If the vet's calculations are correct, yeah. Be Emma's first time seeing a calf born. She's very excited. I'm going to draw pictures of it for show and tell, Emma announced. Mrs. Patterson says I should be a farm vet when I grow up because I'm good with animals. The conversation flowed easy and natural, and Noah found himself relaxing into it, the constant vigilance he usually maintained around strangers gradually easing. Claire was good with Emma, attentive without being overbearing, genuinely interested without the condescending tone some adults used with children. She asked questions and actually listened to the answers, and Emma responded by blooming under the attention. Too soon, the clock hit 7:30, and it was time for Emma to catch the bus. Noah helped her into her jacket and backpack while Claire cleared the breakfast dishes, and together they walked Emma down to the end of the long driveway where the bus would stop. The morning was cold and crisp, their breath visible in little clouds. Emma held Noah's hand on one side and, after a moment's hesitation, reached for Claire's on the other. Noah saw Claire's surprise, the way her fingers tightened carefully around Emma's smaller ones. The yellow bus rumbled into view, brakes hissing as it stopped. Emma released their hands to climb aboard, pausing on the bottom step to wave enthusiastically. Bye, Daddy. Bye, Miss Claire. Don't forget Henrietta Peck's. Then she was gone, bouncing down the aisle to her usual seat, and the bus was pulling away in a cloud of diesel exhaust. Noah and Claire stood there in the settling quiet, watching until the bus disappeared around the bend. Finally, Claire spoke. She's wonderful. You've done a good job with her. She makes it easy. Has her mother's heart. Noah turned back toward the house. Come on, let's get you properly introduced to this place. The next 2 hours were a blur of barns and equipment sheds, chicken coops and cattle pens. Noah showed Claire where everything was kept, explained the feeding schedules, demonstrated how to check the water troughs and gate latches. She absorbed it all with focus intensity, asking practical questions, taking mental notes. They were in the main barn when she finally asked the question he'd been waiting for. Noah, what's your plan? When Lucas comes, and he will come, what are we going to do? Noah set down the feed bucket he'd been holding and turned to face her fully. First thing is, we document everything. Write down dates, times, exactly what happened. Every interaction you've had with Lucas, every threat, every person who can verify any piece of your story. The more evidence we have, the harder it is for him to twist the narrative. Evidence doesn't matter if nobody's willing to look at it. Maybe, but maybe not. Noah leaned against the barn wall, wood rough under his shoulders. I've lived here my whole life too, Claire. I know how this town works, how the power structures operate. But I also know that the Hales aren't invincible. They just make sure everyone thinks they are. There are people in town who don't like them, who've been hurt by them, who'd be happy to see them knock down a peg if they thought they could do it safely. Like who? Judge Morrison, for one. He's retiring next year and doesn't owe the Hales anything. Sheriff's Department is trickier, but Deputy Carson is solid. His sister got screwed over by Hale Construction on a contract dispute a couple years back. And there's Helen Whitmore. Claire's eyes widened. The Helen Whitmore? The one who runs the newspaper? That's the one. She's been trying to get the dirt on the Hales for 20 years. Problem is, nobody's been willing to talk on the record. Noah met Claire's gaze steadily. Until maybe now. You think I should go public? I think we gather our evidence first, build an airtight case, and when Lucas inevitably shows up here making threats, we make sure there are witnesses. Then, when we're ready, we don't just defend. We go on offense. Claire was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then slowly, something shifted in her face. The hunted look that had been there since she arrived began to fade, replaced by something harder, something that looked almost like hope. You really think we can do this? Take on the Hales and win? I think that doing nothing guarantees they win. Fighting back at least gives us a chance. Noah pushed off the wall, retrieving the feed bucket. Besides, I'm tired of men like Lucas Hale thinking they own the world just because their daddy has money. It's time somebody reminded him that power has limits. They worked in companionable silence after that, falling into an easy rhythm. Claire proved to be a quick study and unafraid of hard work. She mucked stalls without complaint, hauled feed bags that had to weigh half what she did, and even won over Henrietta the mean chicken with patience and a handful of cracked corn. By midday, Noah's estimation of her had shifted from stranger in need to genuine asset. She wasn't just grateful for the help, she was determined to earn her place, to prove she wasn't a burden. He respected that more than he could say. They broke for lunch around 1, sandwiches eaten standing at the kitchen counter because neither of them wanted to stop moving long enough to sit. Claire asked questions about the farm's finances, about what crops he grew and what livestock brought in the most profit. Practical questions, like she was planning to be here long enough to make it matter. Can I ask you something personal? She said, wiping mustard from her thumb. Depends on the question. Why do you keep this place? It's a lot of work for one person, and you've got Emma to think about. Wouldn't it be easier to sell, move somewhere with better schools, less responsibility? Noah took a long drink of water, buying time to organize his thoughts. This land's been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather cleared these fields by hand, built the original barn with his own tools. My father expanded the herd, modernized the equipment. And Sarah, my wife, she loved this place. Used to drag me out to watch the sunrise over the east pasture, said she could feel the history in the soil. He set down his glass. Selling would be easier. Lots of things would be easier. But easy isn't the same as right. This is Emma's inheritance, her connection to where she comes from. Long as I can work it, I will. Claire nodded slowly. I understand that. Holding on to what matters, even when it's hard. Yeah. Noah met her eyes. I figure you understand that better than most. The afternoon passed in more work. Fence repairs, equipment maintenance, the endless cycle of tasks that kept a farm running. Claire matched him hour for hour, never complaining, never slacking. By the time the school bus was due, Noah's opinion of her had solidified into something close to trust. They walked down the driveway together again, and this time when Emma bounded off the bus full of stories about her day, it felt natural for Claire to be there listening. Emma had drawn a picture of the 3 of them in art class, stick figures standing in front of a house that was mostly roof and windows, and Claire's eyes went suspiciously bright when Emma presented it to her. That's us, Emma explained unnecessarily. That's you and Daddy and me and the chickens. See? I made Henrietta the mean one bigger because she's bossy. It's beautiful, Claire said, and meant it. Can I keep it? Emma beamed. Uh-huh, I made it for you. So you remember you live here now. The three of them walked back to the house through the gathering cold, Emma chattering between them, and Noah felt that dangerous contentment settling over him again. This could work. This strange little makeshift family they were building, it could actually work. He should have known better than to let himself hope. They were halfway through dinner, Claire's chicken soup that Emma declared better than Mrs. Patterson's, which was high praise indeed, when headlights swept across the kitchen window. Noah's hand stilled on his spoon. They weren't expecting anyone, and surprise visitors on a farm 20 miles from town were rarely good news. The engine shut off. A car door slammed. Claire had gone pale, her spoon clattering against the bowl. That's not... It can't be... Noah was already standing, moving toward the window. A black BMW sat in his driveway, expensive and out of place against the weathered farm buildings. And walking toward the house, with the entitled stride of someone who'd never been told no, was a young man in clothes that cost more than Noah's monthly mortgage. Lucas Hale had found them. "Emma, honey, go to your room," Noah said quietly, not taking his eyes off the approaching figure. "But I'm not done eating. Now, Emma, please." Something in his tone made her obey without further argument. Noah heard her footsteps on the stairs, the door closing. Only then did he turn to Claire, who was gripping the edge of the table like she might float away without it. "Stay in here," Noah said. "Let me handle this." "Noah, he's dangerous. You don't know what he's capable of. Which is why I need you to stay inside where it's safe. Trust me, Claire." She nodded shakily, and Noah stepped out onto the porch just as Lucas Hale reached the bottom step. Up close, Lucas was exactly what Noah expected. Handsome in the way that money could buy, with perfect teeth, an expensive haircut, and eyes that had never known real consequences. There was a bandage across his nose, and the bruises on his face confirmed Claire's story about the tire iron. Good for her. "Can I help you?" Noah kept his voice level, his body language calm but unmovable in the doorway. Lucas looked him up and down with barely concealed disdain. "You must be Bennett. I'm looking for Claire Monroe. I know she's here." "Don't know anyone by that name." "Don't play games with me, farmer." Lucas's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "My truck's been parked down the road for the last hour. I saw her walk down to meet the school bus with you and your kid. So let's skip the part where you pretend to be noble and just send her out here. This doesn't concern you." Noah felt anger rise in his throat but kept it leashed. Losing his temper would only give Lucas ammunition. If Claire's here, it's because this is where she wants to be. And if you're here making threats on my property, then it concerns me plenty. Lucas's expression hardened. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, do you? My family built this county. One phone call and I can make your life very difficult. Bank loans become impossible to renew. Property taxes get reassessed. Health inspectors find violations. The school bus route mysteriously changes, and your kid needs a ride into town every morning." He stepped closer, and Noah could smell expensive cologne mixed with entitlement. "But it doesn't have to be that way. All you have to do is stay out of business that isn't yours. Tell Claire she's got until tomorrow night to pack whatever she took from my car and leave the county. After that, I press charges for assault and theft, and trust me, no judge around here will question a Hale." Noah stayed perfectly still, letting Lucas's words hang in the cold air between them. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Get off my property." Lucas blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct response. "Excuse me? You heard me. Turn around, get in your fancy car, and leave. And don't come back unless you want to explain to the sheriff why you're trespassing after being explicitly told to leave." "The sheriff?" Lucas actually laughed. "The sheriff plays golf with my father every Sunday. You think he's going to take your word over mine?" "Maybe not. But Deputy Carson will take my word. And Judge Morrison. And Helen Whitmore at the newspaper." Noah took a step forward, and Lucas instinctively stepped back. "See, the thing about bullies like you is that you've spent so long getting away with things. You've forgotten that not everyone is scared of you. Some of us just don't like you, and some of us have been waiting for a good reason to push back." Lucas's face flushed with anger. "You're making a huge mistake." "Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. Now get off my land before I call those authorities I just mentioned, and we see whose version of events they believe." For a long moment, Lucas just stared at him, and Noah could see the calculations happening behind those cold eyes, weighing consequences, measuring risks, deciding whether this isolated farmer was worth the trouble. Finally, Lucas smiled, but it was the kind of smile that promised retribution. "You'll regret this, Bennett. I promise you that. When your daughter can't get into college because every school in the state knows her father harbors criminals, when your farm gets seized for back taxes you can't pay, when you're broken and desperate and begging me to make it stop, I want you to remember that you had a choice. You could have stayed out of this. And you could have been a decent human being instead of a spoiled predator who can't handle rejection. We all make choices, Lucas. Live with yours." Lucas turned without another word and stalked back to his BMW. The engine roared to life with more aggression than necessary, and he peeled out of the driveway, spraying gravel. Noah stood on the porch until the taillights disappeared into the distance. Only then did he allow himself to shake, adrenaline catching up with decision, the weight of what he'd just done settling onto his shoulders like a physical thing. The door opened behind him. Claire stepped out, her face streaked with tears. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "He meant every word. He'll destroy you." "He can try." Noah turned to face her, and despite everything, he felt oddly calm. "But he's wrong about one thing. This isn't just your fight anymore, Claire. It's ours. And I've got a feeling that when Lucas starts pulling strings and making threats, he's going to find out that there are more people in this county ready to stand up to the Hales than he thinks. You can't know that. No, but I can hope. And hope's a start." They stood together in the cold dark, the farmhouse warm and lit behind them, and made a silent pact to face whatever came next together, to not back down, to prove that sometimes the right thing and the smart thing were exactly the same. Tomorrow would bring its own battles. But tonight, they had this: solidarity, purpose, and the fragile beginning of something that looked almost like family. Inside, Emma called down that she was ready for her bedtime story. And life, stubborn and persistent as the land itself, went on. The next 3 days passed with the strange tension of waiting for a storm that hadn't quite arrived yet. Noah went through his routines with heightened awareness, checking the road more often than necessary, his phone always within reach. Claire threw herself into farm work with an almost desperate energy, as if staying busy could somehow hold back the inevitable. And Emma, bless her innocent heart, remained blissfully unaware of the gathering clouds, chattering about school projects, and the upcoming Halloween costume parade. But the calm couldn't last forever. It was Tuesday afternoon when the first real blow landed. Noah was in the barn replacing a broken hinge on the tack room door when his phone rang, an unfamiliar number with a local area code. He almost didn't answer, but something made him swipe to accept. "Mr. Bennett, this is Margaret Chen from First National Bank. I'm calling regarding your farm loan account." Noah's stomach dropped. "What about it?" "Well, sir, it's come to our attention during a routine review that there may be some irregularities in your payment history. We're going to need you to come in for a meeting to discuss the status of your account. Would Thursday at 10 work for you?" "Irregularities? I've never missed a payment in 10 years. "I understand, Mr. Bennett, but this is just standard procedure. I'm sure we can clear everything up." Her tone was professionally apologetic but firm. "Thursday at 10? Noah gripped the phone harder. "Fine. I'll be there." He ended the call and stared at the device in his hand like it had just grown teeth. This was Lucas making good on his threats. It had to be. The timing was too perfect, too deliberate. Claire found him 20 minutes later, still standing in the same spot, the broken hinge forgotten at his feet. "Noah? What's wrong?" He told her about the call, watching her face go pale. "They're going after your loan. That's exactly what Lucas did to the owner of the auto shop, who wouldn't fire his nephew after Lucas got him arrested on fake drug charges. Suddenly, the shop's permits were under review, the loan got called in, and within 6 months, the place was shuttered." Claire's hands were shaking. "Noah, you have to tell them I'll leave, before they destroy everything you've built." "No." The word came out harder than he intended. "We're not doing this, Claire. We're not giving him what he wants just because he's flexing his power. That's exactly what he expects, and exactly why he keeps getting away with it." But your farm is paid down to less than $40,000. My payment history is spotless, and I've got documentation to prove it. Whatever irregularities they think they've found, we'll deal with it. Noah picked up the broken hinge, turning it over in his hands. Besides, I made some calls yesterday. Talked to Jim Carson, the deputy I mentioned. Turns out Lucas has been involved in 3 other situations just like yours in the past 2 years. Women who rejected him suddenly finding themselves accused of crimes they didn't commit, losing jobs, getting run out of town. Jim's been documenting it all, waiting for someone brave enough to go on record. Claire's eyes widened. Someone's willing to testify? Not yet. But Jim thinks with your story added to the pattern and with the right pressure applied, some of the others might come forward, especially if they see someone actually fighting back instead of just disappearing. Noah met her gaze steadily. We're building a case, Claire. It's going to take time, but we're going to nail this bastard. The kitchen door banged open, and Emma's voice rang out. Daddy, Miss Claire, come quick! They both moved instantly, Noah's protective instincts kicking into overdrive. They found Emma on the front porch, bouncing on her toes with excitement rather than fear, pointing down the driveway. There's a fancy lady coming, in a really nice car. Noah looked and saw a silver Mercedes making its way up the dirt road, moving carefully to avoid the deeper ruts. The car stopped near the house, and a woman in her 60s emerged, impeccably dressed, steel gray hair cut in a sharp bob, and an expression that suggested she didn't suffer fools gladly. Helen Whitmore. Owner and editor of the County Gazette, and according to local legend, the only person in town who'd ever told Richard Hale to his face that his money didn't impress her. Mr. Bennett, I presume? She approached with an outstretched hand, her handshake firm and brief. Helen Whitmore, I hope you don't mind the unannounced visit, but I thought it best we speak in person. Mistress Whitmore, this is Claire Monroe, and my daughter Emma. Helen's sharp eyes took in Claire with an assessing look that missed nothing. Miss Monroe, I've heard quite a bit about you in the past few days, all from very unreliable sources, I might add, which is precisely why I'm here. She glanced down at Emma, and her expression softened fractionally. Hello, young lady. That's a very nice drawing of chickens on your backpack. Emma beamed. I drew them myself. Do you want to meet the real ones? Emma, why don't you go work on your homework? Noah suggested gently. We need to talk to Mrs. Whitmore about grown-up stuff. Boring grown-up stuff or interesting grown-up stuff? The boring kind, I'm afraid. Emma sighed dramatically, but obeyed, trudging back into the house with the weight of the world on her small shoulders. Once she was safely inside, Helen turned her full attention to Noah and Claire. I'll get straight to the point. I've been investigating the Hale family for 23 years, ever since Richard Hale used his political connections to kill a story. It's running about safety violations at his construction sites. 3 workers were injured, 1 seriously, because proper protocols weren't followed. But the inspector's reports mysteriously disappeared. Witnesses suddenly couldn't remember what they'd seen, and my source at the county office got transferred to a nothing job in the archives. Helen's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. I've watched that family operate above the law for 2 decades, and I am tired of it. So when Jim Carson called me yesterday and said there might finally be a victim willing to fight back, I drove straight out here. Claire looked at Noah, then back to Helen. What exactly are you asking me to do? Tell me your story, on the record. Let me publish it. Lucas Hale has gotten away with his behavior because his victims disappear or stay silent. But if someone stands up publicly, if the pattern becomes impossible to ignore, it opens the door for others to come forward. Helen pulled out a small recording device from her purse. I won't lie to you, Miss Monroe. This will make your life harder in the short term. The Hales will come after you with everything they have, but you're already in their crosshairs. The question is whether you want to go down quietly or fighting. She's not going down at all, Noah interjected. We've got a plan. With all due respect, Mr. Bennett, plans are worthless if they're not executed. And right now, the Hales think they're dealing with isolated targets. A farmer protecting his employee. A disgraced waitress with no credibility. But the moment this becomes public, the moment the community has to actually look at what Lucas Hale has done, the power dynamic shifts. Helen's eyes were fierce. I've got 3 other women who've agreed to speak anonymously about Lucas's behavior. With Claire's story as the centerpiece, we can run a feature that the Hales can't suppress or spin. It won't be enough to put Lucas in jail, not immediately, but it will be enough to make people start asking questions. Claire was quiet for a long moment, her arms wrapped around herself against the cold wind that was picking up. Noah wanted to tell her she didn't have to do this, that they'd find another way, but he recognized the look on her face. She'd already made her decision. "What do you need from me?" Claire asked. "Everything. Dates, times, witnesses if there are any, the setup at the diner, the eviction, every interaction with Lucas. And I need you to be prepared for them to attack your character, your credibility, your past. They'll dig up every mistake you've ever made and parade it in front of the whole county." Helen's expression softened slightly. "But I'll be there with you. And from what Jim tells me, so will Mr. Bennett and a number of other people who are sick of watching the Hales get away with this." They moved inside, settling around the kitchen table while Emma did her homework in the living room, close enough that Noah could keep an ear on her but far enough to give them privacy. For the next 2 hours, Helen questioned Claire with the precision of a prosecutor, taking notes in a shorthand that looked like it hadn't changed since journalism school. Every so often, she'd pause to verify a detail or push for more specifics, never satisfied with vague recollections. Noah made coffee and listened, his anger building with each new detail Claire revealed. The calculated cruelty of it, the way Lucas had systematically dismantled her life piece by piece, all because she'd had the audacity to say no. And underneath his anger was a growing determination. This ended now. One way or another, Lucas Hale was going to face consequences for once in his privileged life. "All right," Helen said finally, clicking off her recorder. "I've got enough for a solid story. I'll need a few days to corroborate details and reach out to my other sources. I'm planning to run it in this Sunday's edition. Gives us time to prepare and limits the Hales' ability to kill it before publication." She looked directly at Claire. "Between now and then, I need you to stay visible. Don't hide. Go into town. Be seen at the grocery store, the post office. Let people see that you're not cowering, not running. It'll make you a harder target." "Or paint a bigger bullseye on my back," Claire said quietly. "Possibly. But Noah's right about one thing. You're already a target. Might as well use it to your advantage." Helen stood, gathering her things. "I'll be in touch before the story runs. In the meantime, document everything. Every phone call, every visitor, every hint of pressure or intimidation. The Hales will try to stop this, and when they do, I want proof of it." Noah walked Helen out to her car, leaving Claire at the table looking drained but somehow lighter, like she'd finally set down a weight she'd been carrying too long. "She's brave," Helen said, pausing with her hand on the car door. "Braver than most, but bravery doesn't always win, Mr. Bennett. Sometimes it just gets you hurt." "I know, but sometimes it's all you've got." Noah glanced back at the house, where he could see Claire through the window, head bowed over the table. "She's not doing this alone. Whatever the Hales throw at us, we'll handle it together." "Good, because they're going to throw everything." Helen's smile was grim. "Richard Hale doesn't like being challenged, and Lucas is his blind spot. The old man is covered for that boy since he was expelled from boarding school for assaulting another student. This won't be any different, except this time we're not letting them sweep it under the rug." She climbed into her Mercedes and drove away, leaving Noah standing in the gathering dusk wondering what exactly he'd set in motion. Behind him, the house glowed warm against the coming night, and he could hear Emma's laughter as Claire helped her with some math problem. Normal, peaceful. Everything he'd been trying to protect since Sarah died. And now he'd deliberately put it all at risk. Thursday came too fast. Noah dressed in his only suit, the one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral and hadn't touched since, and drove into town with Claire beside him. She'd insisted on coming, said she wouldn't let him face the bank alone, and Noah didn't have the heart to argue. Besides, there was strength in numbers, even if one of those numbers was currently persona non grata in the community. First National Bank occupied a grand old building on Main Street, all marble columns and brass fixtures meant to project stability and trustworthiness. Noah had been banking here since he was 18, had signed his farm loan papers at the same desk his father had used. Walking through those doors now felt like betrayal, even though he'd done nothing wrong. Margaret Chen was waiting in her office, a neat woman in her 40s with sympathetic eyes and a stack of files that looked ominous. Standing behind her desk was someone Noah hadn't expected to see, Richard Hale himself, looking every inch the successful businessman in a suit that probably cost more than Noah's truck. "Mr. Bennett, thank you for coming in." Margaret gestured to the chairs across from her desk, pointedly ignoring Claire. "I believe you know Mr. Hale. He's here as a courtesy, given his position on the bank's board of directors." "How convenient," Noah said flatly, remaining standing. "What's this about, Margaret?" "Please sit down. This won't take long." Noah and Claire sat, and Margaret opened the top file with the careful precision of someone who'd rehearsed this conversation. "As I mentioned on the phone, some irregularities have come to light regarding your loan account. Specifically, there appear to be 3 payments over the past 18 months that were credited to your account, but whose origin we can't verify. The checks cleared, but the account they were drawn from has since been closed, and we have reason to believe the funds may have been obtained fraudulently." Noah stared at her. "That's impossible. Every payment I've made has been from my personal checking account. I've got records." "We're not suggesting you did anything wrong, Mr. Bennett," Richard Hale interjected smoothly. "But the bank has a fiduciary responsibility to investigate potential fraud. I'm sure you understand." "What I understand is that this is remarkably convenient timing, given that your son threatened me less than a week ago." Richard's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "My son has never mentioned you." "Really?" "Because he was at my property on Sunday night, making threats about what would happen if I didn't turn over Claire Monroe, who, by the way, he's been systematically harassing for months after she rejected his advances." "Mr. Bennett, these are serious accusations." Margaret looked genuinely uncomfortable now, caught between her job and what was clearly a setup. "Perhaps we should focus on the matter at hand. The matter at hand is that this is retaliation, pure and simple." Noah pulled out his phone, scrolling to the photos he'd taken of his payment records. "Every single payment has been made on time, from the same account, for 10 years. If there's fraud involved, it's not on my end. Nevertheless, until we can verify the legitimacy of these payments, we'll need to freeze any further draws on your credit line and flag the account for additional review." Margaret wouldn't meet his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett, but my hands are tied." Claire spoke up for the first time, her voice quiet but clear. "How much would it cost to have an independent audit done? Someone not associated with the bank or Mr. Hale?" Richard turned his cold gaze on her. "And you are?" "Claire Monroe. The woman your son has been terrorizing for the past 3 months. The one he framed for theft, got evicted from her apartment, and threatened with assault charges if she didn't leave town." She stood up, and Noah saw that her hands were shaking but her spine was straight. "I'm also the woman who's going on record this Sunday in the County Gazette with a detailed account of everything Lucas has done, along with 3 other women who've experienced similar treatment." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 20 degrees. Richard's expression went from cold to glacial. "If you publish libelous statements about my son, Miss Monroe, you'll find yourself on the wrong end of a very expensive lawsuit." "Truth isn't libel, Mr. Hale. And I've got documentation, witnesses, and a pattern of behavior that goes back years. Your son is a predator who's been using your money and influence to escape consequences, but that ends now." Noah had never been prouder of anyone in his life. Richard stood slowly, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate precision. "Margaret, I trust you'll handle this loan situation appropriately. Mr. Bennett, I strongly suggest you reconsider who you're associating with. Sometimes loyalty is admirable. Sometimes it's just stupidity." He paused at the door, looking back at Claire. "My lawyers will be very interested to read this article. I hope you're prepared for what comes next." Then he was gone, leaving a silence that felt like the aftermath of an explosion. Margaret let out a long breath. "Mr. Bennett, I want you to know that I don't like this any more than you do, but Richard Hale wasn't lying about the board position. If I don't follow protocol, I'll lose my job." "I understand. Do what you need to do." Noah stood, helping Claire to her feet. "But I want copies of everything, every flagged transaction, every piece of documentation you're using to justify this freeze. And I'll be bringing in my own accountant to review the records." Of course. I'll have my assistant make copies for you. Margaret actually looked relieved. For what it's worth, I hope this gets resolved quickly. Outside, the autumn sunshine felt too bright, too normal for what had just happened. Noah and Claire walked to his truck in silence, not speaking until they were safely inside with the doors closed. I'm sorry, Claire said immediately. I shouldn't have confronted him like that. I just made everything worse. You were magnificent. Noah started the engine, but didn't put the truck in gear yet. You looked Richard Hale in the eye and told him the truth. Do you know how many people in this town have wanted to do that for years? You're not making things worse, Claire. You're finally making them better. It doesn't feel better. It feels terrifying. Yeah, well, that's because it is terrifying, but we're doing it anyway. Noah pulled out of the parking lot, heading back toward the farm. Helen was right. We can't win by playing it safe. We have to make noise, force people to pay attention, make this too big to sweep under the rug. They drove in silence for a while, the town giving way to open farmland, the tension gradually easing from both their shoulders as familiar territory surrounded them. Finally, Claire spoke again. Noah, what happens if we lose? If the Hales are too powerful? If nobody believes me? If this whole thing backfires? He thought about Emma waiting at home with Mrs. Patterson, about the farm that had been in his family for 3 generations, about everything he stood to lose if this went wrong. Then he thought about the look on Claire's face when Lucas had her cornered, the systematic cruelty of men who thought their money made them untouchable, and the kind of world he wanted his daughter to grow up in. Then we lose fighting, he said simply. But at least we'll have tried. At least we'll know we didn't just roll over and let them win. Claire nodded, turning to look out the window at the passing landscape. Your wife must have been an extraordinary person to inspire this kind of stubbornness in you. She was. She believed that silence in the face of wrong was its own kind of sin, that if you had the power to help and didn't use it, you were just as guilty as the people causing harm. Noah smiled sadly. She'd probably tell me I'm being reckless, putting Emma at risk like this, but she'd also be the first one on the front lines if she were here. I wish I could have met her. She would have liked you. You've got the same steel spine underneath all that fear. When they got home, Emma was practicing cartwheels in the front yard while Mrs. Patterson watched from the porch. She ran to greet them, full of news about a substitute teacher and a boy who'd brought his pet hamster for show and tell. Normal childhood chaos, beautifully oblivious to adult machinations. That night, after Emma was asleep and the house was quiet, Noah found Claire sitting on the porch steps, staring out at the dark fields. He brought 2 mugs of tea and sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Can't sleep? He asked. Too much thinking. Too much worrying about Sunday, about what happens when that article comes out. She accepted the tea gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warmth. What if nobody cares, Noah? What if people read it and just shrug and say that's how things are? Some will. Some people are too invested in the status quo to see the truth even when it's staring them in the face. But not everyone. There are good people in this town, Claire. People who've been hurt by the Hales. People who are tired of watching them get away with everything. Helen's article will give them permission to speak up. You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, what's the point? They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge in the clear autumn sky. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out its hunting cry, and the wind carried the smell of approaching winter. Thank you, Claire said quietly, for everything, for taking me in, for fighting for me, for making me believe that maybe I'm not just a victim in someone else's story. You were never just a victim. You were always a survivor. I just gave you a safe place to remember that. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and Noah felt something shift between them. Not romance exactly, but a recognition of shared purpose, of 2 people who'd found each other at exactly the right moment and decided to be brave together. Whatever happens on Sunday, Claire said, I want you to know that these weeks with you and Emma, they've been the best thing that's happened to me in years. Even with all the fear and uncertainty, I feel more like myself here than I have anywhere else. Then stay. Not just until the Hales are dealt with, but after. There's always work to do on a farm, always room for someone who pulls their weight. Noah paused, then added, Emma asked me yesterday if you were going to be her new mom. I didn't know what to tell her. Claire lifted her head, looking at him in the dim light from the kitchen window. What do you want to tell her? I want to tell her that family isn't always about blood. That sometimes the people who matter most are the ones who choose to stay when things get hard. But I also don't want to make promises I can't keep or put pressure on something that's still so new. Then tell her the truth. That I'm here now, and I'm not planning on leaving, and we'll figure out the rest as we go. Claire smiled, tentative but real. Is that okay? More than okay. They stayed there until the cold drove them inside, and Noah felt the peculiar sensation of his carefully guarded heart beginning to open again. Not replacing Sarah, nothing could do that, but making room for new people, new possibilities, new versions of what family could mean. Saturday arrived too quickly, bringing with it the knowledge that tomorrow the article would run, and whatever fragile peace they'd built would shatter. Noah spent the day preparing, documenting everything, organizing his financial records, calling in favors from the few allies he had in town. Deputy Carson stopped by in the afternoon, off duty and looking nervous. Just wanted to give you a heads up, Jim said, accepting coffee in Noah's kitchen. Word's gotten around about Helen's article. The Hales are scrambling, calling in favors, putting pressure on the newspaper's advertisers. But Helen's not budging. The story runs tomorrow as planned. How bad is it going to be? Noah asked. Honestly, probably worse than you're expecting. Richard Hale isn't used to being challenged, and he's got enough power to make your life miserable. But, Jim leaned forward, his expression serious. He's also getting older, making mistakes. And Lucas is his weakness. The old man's protected that boy for so long, he can't see what everyone else does. That Lucas is a liability, not an asset. Will you back us up when this goes public? Officially, my hands are tied. The sheriff's made it clear that any deputy who goes against the Hales better have ironclad evidence. But unofficially? Jim pulled out a folder from his jacket. I've been keeping my own files. Every complaint that got buried, every victim who was too scared to press charges, every instance where Lucas got a pass because of his last name. The moment you need it, it's yours. After Jim left, Noah showed the folder to Claire. They sat at the kitchen table going through page after page of documented abuse. Not just Lucas's victims, but a pattern of behavior from the entire Hale family spanning decades. Contracts awarded to friends, permits denied to competitors, regulations conveniently overlooked for projects the Hales had financial interest in. This is huge, Claire breathed, staring at the evidence. This isn't just about Lucas anymore. This is corruption at every level. Which makes it more dangerous. We're not just going after a spoiled rich kid anymore. We're threatening an entire power structure. Noah closed the folder carefully. Are you sure you want to do this? Because once that article runs tomorrow, there's no taking it back. Claire met his eyes without hesitation. I've never been more sure of anything. That night, Noah couldn't sleep. He checked on Emma 3 times, making sure she was safe and sound, her innocent dreams undisturbed by the war they were about to wage. He found Claire in the spare room, sitting by the window, staring out at the dark farm. Tomorrow changes everything, she said without looking at him. I know. Are you scared? Terrified, but also ready. Noah leaned against the doorframe. We're doing the right thing, Claire. Whatever happens next, we're on the right side. I hope that's enough. Me too. Sunday morning dawned cold and clear, the kind of perfect autumn day that made everything seem possible. Noah drove into town early to pick up a copy of the County Gazette from the gas station, his heart pounding as he pulled the newspaper from the rack. The headline was front page, impossible to miss. A pattern of abuse. Multiple women accuse Lucas Hale of harassment and intimidation. Helen had done exactly what she'd promised. Claire's story was the centerpiece, detailed and damning, but it was surrounded by corroborating accounts from 3 other women, all anonymous, but all following the same pattern. Rejection followed by retaliation. Lives systematically destroyed. And throughout it all, the Hale family's money and influence ensuring that justice never quite arrived. Noah bought 5 copies and drove home with his hands shaking on the wheel. This was it. The point of no return. By noon, everyone in the county would have read this article, and the battle lines would be drawn. Claire was waiting on the porch when he pulled up, Emma beside her still in her pajamas. He handed her a copy of the paper and watched her face as she read, watched the fear and hope and determination cycle through her expression. "It's done," she whispered. "It's really done." "It's just beginning," Noah corrected gently. "But, yeah, it's done." Emma tugged on Claire's hand, looking between the adults with the uncanny perception of children. "Is this about the bad man who came here? The one who made you sad?" Claire knelt down to Emma's level, her hands gentle on the little girl's shoulders. "Yes, sweetheart, but we're not going to be sad anymore. We're going to be brave instead. Like in stories, where the heroes fight the dragon? Exactly like that." Emma considered this solemnly, then nodded. "Okay, can I help?" Noah felt his throat tighten with love and pride for this fierce small person. "You can help by being exactly who you are, brave and kind and strong. Can you do that?" "I can do that, Daddy." They spent the morning together, deliberately normal, making pancakes and doing laundry, and avoiding the phone that started ringing around 10 and didn't stop. Noah let it go to voicemail, not ready yet to face whatever reactions were pouring in. But by afternoon, they couldn't hide anymore. The first car pulled up around 2, Helen Whitmore's Mercedes, followed closely by a truck Noah recognized as belonging to Tom Morrison, the retired judge. Helen got out holding a briefcase and wearing an expression of grim satisfaction. "Quite the response we're getting. The Hale family attorney has already called threatening legal action, 3 major advertisers have pulled their accounts, and the sheriff's office has opened an official investigation. Not into Lucas," she added quickly, seeing Claire's face, "into my sources and methods. They're trying to discredit the story." Judge Morrison joined them on the porch, his weathered face serious. "I read the article, twice, and I've been thinking about some things I've seen over the years. Rulings that didn't sit right, cases that got dismissed for reasons that never quite made sense. If you're serious about pursuing this, if you really want to take on the Hales, you're going to need legal representation." "I can't afford a lawyer," Claire said quietly. "Didn't say you could." "I said you needed one." Tom smiled. "I've got a friend in the city, does civil rights work, might be interested in taking this pro bono if the evidence is as strong as I think it is. You willing to talk to her?" Claire looked at Noah, who nodded encouragement. "Yes. I'll talk to anyone who can help." More cars arrived throughout the afternoon, some offering support, others just curious, a few clearly hostile. Word had spread fast, and the community was dividing exactly the way Noah had expected. Some people who'd known Claire before came to offer quiet encouragement. Others drove by slowly, their judgment clear even through closed windows. And through it all, no sign of Lucas or his family. That silence was somehow more ominous than any direct attack. As the sun began to set and the last of the visitors left, Noah gathered Claire and Emma in the kitchen for an early dinner. They ate quietly, exhaustion setting in after the emotional upheaval of the day. "What happens now?" Emma asked through a mouthful of spaghetti. "Now we wait," Noah said. "We keep living our lives, doing our work, and we wait to see what the Hales do next." "And when they do something?" Claire asked. Noah reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Then we deal with it, together, like we've been doing all along." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, dark and heavy, with the promise of rain. Noah knew that somewhere in town, in some expensive house with perfect landscaping, the Hale family was planning their response. But for now, in this moment, he had everything that mattered. His daughter safe, Claire beside him, and the knowledge that they'd finally, truly started to fight back. The reckoning was coming, but they were ready. Or at least, they were as ready as they could be for what came next. The storm that had been threatening all evening finally broke around midnight, rain hammering against the farmhouse windows with enough force to wake Noah from restless sleep. He lay there listening to the wind howl through the eaves, thinking about everything that had changed in the 2 weeks since Helen's article ran. The community had fractured exactly as predicted, some people rallying behind Claire, others circling the wagons around the Hale family, and most just trying to avoid getting caught in the crossfire. What he hadn't expected was the silence from Lucas himself. No more late-night visits, no direct confrontations, nothing but an eerie quiet that felt like the calm before something catastrophic. Richard Hale had made his moves through official channels. The bank investigation was still ongoing. 2 of Noah's regular buyers for his cattle had suddenly found other suppliers, And the property tax assessment notice that arrived last week suggested his land value had mysteriously tripled overnight. Death by 1,000 cuts, designed to break him slowly without leaving fingerprints. But they were managing. Barely, but managing. Noah got up and padded downstairs, unsurprised to find the kitchen light already on and Claire sitting at the table with a mug of tea and a stack of papers. She'd been meeting with Judge Morrison's lawyer friend, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who'd taken one look at the evidence and agreed to represent Claire pro bono. The paperwork spread across the table was for the civil suit they were filing against Lucas: harassment, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. A long shot legally, but Patricia said the real goal was discovery, forcing the Hales to turn over documents and submit to depositions. "Can't sleep either?" Claire asked, looking up as Noah entered. "Storm woke me, and my brain won't shut off." He poured himself coffee even though it was nearly 1 in the morning, because sleep seemed like a distant dream anyway. "How's the prep going?" "Terrifying. Patricia says we need to be ready for them to dig up everything about my past, every mistake, every embarrassing moment, anything they can use to paint me as unreliable or vindictive." Claire rubbed her eyes tiredly. She wasn't kidding. "They've already got investigators talking to my ex-boyfriend from college, the manager who fired me from my first waitressing job when I was 19, even my old landlord from 5 years ago." "Finding anything useful?" "Depends on your definition. Apparently I was a mediocre student, a decent employee who called in sick twice in 3 years, and I was late with rent once when my car needed emergency repairs." She laughed bitterly. "Earth-shattering stuff. Really proves I'm a lying criminal." Noah sat down across from her, pushing aside some of the papers to see her face better. "You know none of that matters, right? Everyone's got a past. Everyone's made mistakes. The Hales are just trying to distract from the real issue." "I know. Patricia says the same thing, but it still feels awful, having strangers pick apart my entire life looking for ammunition." Claire set down her tea with shaking hands. "Sometimes I wonder if we're doing the right thing. If maybe it would have been easier to just leave, start over somewhere else." "Easier, yeah. But easier isn't the same as right." "You keep saying that, but what if the right thing cost you everything? Your farm, your stability, Emma's security." She met his eyes, and Noah saw the guilt there, the weight of feeling responsible for everything he stood to lose. "What if I'm not worth it?" Noah reached across the table, taking her hand in his. Her fingers were cold despite the warm tea, and he could feel the tremor running through her. "You listen to me, Claire Monroe. You are worth it. Not because of what you do or don't bring to this fight, but because you're a human being who deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Because Lucas Hale doesn't get to destroy people's lives just because he's rich and connected. Because if we don't stand up to bullies like him, who will?" "But Emma is learning that her father doesn't back down from doing what's right, even when it's hard. That's a lesson worth whatever price we pay." He squeezed her hand gently. "Besides, you're not some charity case I'm protecting out of obligation. You're part of this family now. You've become important to both of us. And family protects family." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, managing a wobbly smile. "When did you get so good at inspirational speeches?" "Had a good teacher. Sarah always said that courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about being terrified and doing it anyway." Noah released her hand and gestured at the paperwork. "So what's next with Patricia?" "Depositions start next week. She wants to depose Lucas first, catch him off guard before his lawyers can coach him too much. Then we'll go after some of the other people who've enabled him, the diner manager who fired me without a real investigation, the landlord who evicted me based on a phone call from Richard Hale, anyone who can testify to the pattern of retaliation." "And the other women? The ones from Helen's article?" Claire's expression clouded. "2 of them have agreed to be deposed, but only under seal. Their testimony won't be public. The third got cold feet after the Hales lawyers started sniffing around. I don't blame her. This is scary, going up against people with unlimited resources and no conscience." They talked for another hour, going over strategy and timeline, until exhaustion finally started to overtake anxiety. Claire went up to bed and Noah remained in the kitchen, staring at the papers scattered across the table and wondering for the 100th time if he was leading them all off a cliff. But when morning came, bringing with it Emma's cheerful chatter and the familiar rhythm of farm chores, his doubts receded. They were doing the right thing. They had to believe that. The next week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Noah threw himself into work, preparing the farm for winter, while Claire spent long hours with Patricia preparing for depositions. Emma seemed to sense the tension in the house, becoming quieter, more clingy, asking questions that were hard to answer honestly without scaring her. "Is Miss Claire going to have to leave?" she asked one night during bedtime stories, her small face scrunched with worry. "Why would you think that, baby?" "Because that's what happens in stories. The bad people make the good people go away, and Mr. Hale is a bad person, right?" Noah set down the book, pulling Emma into his lap. "Mr. Hale is definitely not a good person. But this isn't a story, sweetheart. This is real life, and in real life, we fight for the people we care about. Miss Claire isn't going anywhere unless she wants to, and we're doing everything we can to make sure the bad people don't win. But what if they do win? Then we'll figure out what comes next. But we won't give up without fighting, okay? That's not who we are." Emma nodded against his chest, her arms tight around his neck. "I don't want her to leave, Daddy. I love her." The simple declaration hit Noah like a punch to the chest. He'd known Emma was getting attached, but hearing it stated so plainly brought home just how much was at stake. If this went wrong, if they lost and Claire had to leave, it wouldn't just be his heartbreaking. It would be his daughter's too. "I know, Em. I love her too." The words surprised him even as he said them, but he realized they were true. Somewhere between that first desperate night at the gate and now, between shared dinners and farm work and late-night conversations, he'd fallen in love with Claire Monroe. Not the desperate, all-consuming love he'd had for Sarah. That was its own thing, irreplaceable and sacred. But a different kind of love, built on respect and partnership and the daily choice to show up for each other even when things got hard. The thought terrified him almost as much as the legal battle they were fighting. Lucas's deposition was scheduled for Wednesday morning at Patricia's office in the city, 45 minutes from the farm. Noah had arranged for Mrs. Patterson to watch Emma, and he drove Claire in because she was too nervous to trust herself behind the wheel. "What if I freeze up?" she asked, fidgeting with the strap of her purse. "What if his lawyers twist everything I say, make me look stupid or vindictive? Then Patricia will object and clarify. That's literally her job." Noah kept his voice calm even though his own heart was racing. "Just tell the truth, Claire. That's all you have to do. Tell them exactly what happened, exactly how it made you feel, and let the facts speak for themselves." Patricia's office was in a modern building that tried too hard to look important, all glass and steel and uncomfortable furniture in the waiting room. She met them at the elevator, looking confident in a navy suit and carrying a briefcase that suggested she meant business. "Claire, Noah, good morning. Lucas and his legal team are already here. They showed up 30 minutes early, probably trying to throw us off balance." She led them down a hallway to a conference room. "Remember what we discussed. Answer only what's asked, don't volunteer information, and if you need a break at any point, say so. This is a marathon, not a sprint." The conference room was dominated by a long table where 3 lawyers in expensive suits sat reviewing notes, and at the head of the table, looking bored and slightly hungover, was Lucas Hale himself. He glanced up as they entered, and something cruel flickered across his face when he saw Claire. "Well, well, the waitress who could. Brought your farmer friend for emotional support?" His voice was mocking, designed to provoke. "Mr. Hale, I'd advise you to refrain from addressing my client directly," Patricia said coolly, settling into her seat and gesturing for Claire to sit beside her. Noah took a chair along the wall, close enough to be supportive, but out of the official proceedings. The lead attorney for Lucas was a man named Caldwell, silver-haired and smooth, with the kind of expensive smile that never reached his eyes. "Let's begin, shall we? For the record, this is the deposition of Lucas Hale in the matter of Monroe versus Hale. Case number." What followed was 3 hours of the most frustrating verbal combat Noah had ever witnessed. Patricia asked straightforward questions about Lucas's relationship with Claire, the events at the diner, the timing of her eviction. Lucas answered with carefully coached responses that admitted nothing and implied everything. He barely remembered Claire, couldn't comment on personnel decisions at the diner since he didn't work there, had no knowledge of why her landlord might have terminated her lease. "Do you recall visiting Mr. Noah Bennett's property on the evening of October 18th? Patricia asked, her pen poised over her notes. I may have driven out that way. I don't specifically recall. You don't recall threatening Mr. Bennett and demanding he turn over Miss Monroe. I absolutely did not threaten anyone. If I stopped by, it would have been to have a civil conversation. Lucas's smile was all innocence. Though I can understand how Mr. Bennett might have misinterpreted my concern as something more sinister, farmers aren't always the most sophisticated people. Noah's hands clenched on the armrests, but he forced himself to remain still, remain silent. Getting angry was exactly what Lucas wanted. Patricia didn't rise to the bait. Let's talk about July 15th of this year. Do you recall visiting Millie's diner that evening? I eat there frequently. I couldn't say if I was there that specific date. Do you recall asking Miss Monroe to accompany you after her shift ended? I may have made friendly conversation with the waitress. That's not a crime. And when she declined your invitation, how did you respond? Lucas leaned back in his chair, the picture of relaxed confidence. I probably said something like, "Have a nice evening," and left, like a normal person would. So you deny becoming angry when she rejected you? Objection, Caldwell interjected smoothly. Assumes facts, not an evidence. My client has stated he doesn't specifically recall this interaction, and you're now asking him to recall emotional states from a conversation he doesn't remember having. Patricia made a note. Let me rephrase. Mr. Hale, in your interactions with women who have declined your romantic or sexual advances, how would you characterize your typical response? Objection. Relevance. I'm establishing a pattern of behavior, counselor. It's directly relevant to the claims in this case. The legal back and forth continued, each side maneuvering for advantage, while Lucas sat there looking increasingly pleased with himself. He was good at this, Noah realized. Good at staying just on the right side of plausible deniability, at making Claire sound paranoid or vindictive without ever quite saying it directly. But Patricia was better. Mr. Hale, are you aware that Miss Monroe was terminated from her position at Millie's Diner on July 17th, 2 days after the evening you may or may not recall asking her out? I heard something about that. Shame, really. Theft is a serious matter. Alleged theft. The charges were never filed because the diner owner declined to prosecute. Interesting timing, though, wouldn't you say? I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking if you find it coincidental that a woman rejects you on July 15th and loses her job on July 17th. Objection. Caldwell was on his feet now. Counsel is harassing my client with leading questions and unsupported insinuations. Sustained, the court reporter said automatically, though in a deposition there was no judge to actually sustain anything. It was pure theater. Patricia smiled thinly. Let's move on. Mr. Hale, how would you describe your relationship with your father, Richard Hale? Lucas's expression flickered, the first crack in his composed facade. That's personal and completely irrelevant. On the contrary, it's highly relevant. Your father holds significant influence in this community, doesn't he? Sits on various boards, has extensive business holdings. My father is a successful businessman. What does that have to do with anything? It establishes means and opportunity, Mr. Hale. If someone wanted to, say, pressure a landlord to evict a tenant, or encourage a bank to freeze someone's credit line, or ensure that certain job applications never got callbacks, having a father with that kind of influence would make those things remarkably easy, wouldn't it? Objection! Caldwell was red-faced now. This is outrageous speculation with no basis in fact. Then let's establish some facts. Mr. Hale, did you discuss Miss Monroe with your father at any point between July and October of this year? Lucas hesitated, and Noah saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. Lie and risk getting caught, or admit to conversations that might implicate him. I may have mentioned that there was a woman making false accusations against me, as a concerned son would do. And what did your father say? He said he'd look into it. Make sure my reputation wasn't being unfairly damaged. Look into it how? I don't know the specifics. My father handles his own business. Patricia made another note, and Noah could see her satisfaction in the small smile she couldn't quite hide. Lucas had just admitted that his father had taken action on his behalf. It wasn't much, but it was a thread to pull. The deposition dragged on through lunch and into the afternoon, covering every interaction Claire had documented, every witness to the pattern of retaliation. Lucas stuck to his strategy of vague non-answers and implied innocence. But cracks kept appearing. A flash of anger when Patricia pressed too hard. A moment of arrogance when he thought he'd scored a point. Small inconsistencies in his timeline that Patricia cataloged methodically. Finally, around 4 o'clock, Patricia closed her notebook. "Thank you, Mr. Hale. That's all I have for today, though we reserve the right to recall you if new evidence comes to light." "Are we done?" Lucas stood immediately, straightening his designer jacket. "Not quite. My client will be deposed next week, and I'm sure your team will have questions for her. We'll be in touch about scheduling." Patricia's smile was professional but cold. "Please give my regards to your father." Lucas and his lawyers filed out without another word, and as soon as the door closed behind them, Claire sagged in her chair like a puppet with cut strings. "That was awful," she whispered. "He lied about everything and made me sound crazy, and they're going to get away with it." "Actually, he gave us quite a bit to work with." Patricia was already reviewing her notes, her pen flying across the page, marking key points. "He admitted his father intervened on his behalf, admitted to knowing about your termination, and contradicted himself at least 3 times about his memory of events. It's not a smoking gun, but it's ammunition." "Will it be enough?" Noah asked. "That depends on what we find in discovery. I've already filed motions for the diner's employment records, the property management company's communications with your landlord, and Richard Hale's phone records for the relevant time period. If we can connect the dots between Lucas's complaints and the retaliatory actions, we've got a real case." Patricia looked at Claire seriously. "But I won't lie to you. This is going to get worse before it gets better. They're going to come after you with everything they have. Are you prepared for that?" Claire glanced at Noah, drawing strength from his steady presence, then turned back to Patricia. "I'm prepared to see this through, whatever it takes." They drove home in the gathering dusk, both emotionally drained but grimly determined. Emma met them at the door with a drawing she'd made of a knight fighting a dragon, which she presented solemnly to Claire. "Mrs. Patterson said knights always win if they're brave enough," Emma announced. "So I drawed you being brave." Claire knelt down and pulled Emma into a fierce hug, and Noah saw tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll keep this forever." That night, after Emma was asleep and the house was quiet, Noah found Claire on the porch again, wrapped in a blanket against the cold, staring out at the dark fields. "You did good today, calm," he said, settling beside her. "I know it didn't feel like it, but you held your ground. You didn't let him intimidate you." "He's gonna win, isn't he? Men like Lucas always win. They've got money and lawyers and connections, and we've got what? Hope and stubbornness? We've got the truth, and we've got each other." Noah took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I meant what I said the other night, Claire. You're not alone in this. Whatever happens, we face it together." She turned to look at him, and in the dim light from the kitchen window, he could see the vulnerability in her face, the desperate hope warring with learned caution. "Why are you doing this, Noah? Really? I know what you said about doing the right thing, but there has to be more to it. You're risking everything for someone you barely know." "I know you well enough. I know you're brave and stubborn and kind. I know you make Emma laugh and you work harder than anyone I've ever met and you care about things that matter. I know you've been knocked down more times than anyone should have to endure, and you keep getting back up." He paused, then decided to just say it, "Consequences be damned. And I know that I'm falling in love with you, which probably makes me an idiot given the timing and everything that's at stake. But there it is." Claire stared at him, her mouth slightly open, tears tracking down her cheeks. "Noah, you don't have to say anything back. I'm not asking you to. I just thought you should know that this isn't charity or obligation or even just doing the right thing. It's personal. You're personal to me. And Emma adores you. So yeah, I'm risking everything, but what I'm risking it for is worth it." For a long moment, she just looked at him, and Noah braced himself for gentle rejection, for the reasonable explanation of why this could never work, why they needed to focus on the legal battle and not complicate things with emotions. Instead, Claire leaned forward and kissed him. It was tentative at first, questioning, but when Noah kissed back, she deepened it, her hands coming up to frame his face like she was memorizing the shape of him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Claire rested her forehead against his. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've been trying not to, trying to keep some distance so it wouldn't hurt so much if I had to leave. But I love you and Emma, and this farm, and the life we're building together, and I'm terrified that Lucas is going to destroy it all. He can't destroy what we have unless we let him, and I'm not letting him. Are you? No? No, I'm not. They stayed there on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, until the cold drove them inside. That night, Noah slept better than he had in weeks. Claire in the room down the hall, and hope, fragile but real, settling into the spaces between his ribs. The next morning brought a phone call that changed everything. Noah was feeding the chickens when his phone rang. Helen Whitmore's number lighting up the screen. He answered immediately, his heart already accelerating with the instinct that good news rarely came this early. Noah, I need you to sit down for this. Helen's voice was tight with barely contained excitement. I just got a call from someone I didn't expect to hear from, someone with information about the Hales that could blow this case wide open. Who? Diane Shepard. She was Richard Hale's executive assistant for 15 years until she retired last month. And apparently she's been keeping records of everything. Phone calls, meetings, documents that should have been destroyed. She says she's got proof that Richard personally orchestrated the campaign against Claire and evidence of at least a dozen other instances where the Hales used their influence to retaliate against people who crossed them. Noah's hand tightened on the phone. Why is she coming forward now? Because she read the article. Because she's got grandkids and she's tired of protecting men who abuse their power. And because, Helen's voice went grim, Richard Hale had her pension cut by 40% when she retired, claiming budget issues, even though she knows for a fact the company's making record profits. Apparently even loyal employees get thrown under the bus when they're no longer useful. Can we trust her? Patricia's meeting with her this afternoon to review what she's got. If it's even half as damaging as she claims, the Hales won't be able to dismiss this as a vindictive ex-employee with no proof. We're talking documented evidence, audio recordings, emails that explicitly discuss how to handle problem people. Helen paused. This could be it, Noah. This could be what finally brings them down. Noah hung up and immediately went to find Claire, who was in the barn organizing feed supplies. When he told her about Diane Shepard, he watched hope and fear battle across her face. What if it's a trap? She asked. What if the Hales sent her to feed us false information? Then Patricia will figure it out. She's not going to take anything at face value. Noah pulled Claire into his arms, feeling her trembling against him. But what if it's real, Claire? What if we're finally about to get the evidence we need? Then this is almost over, one way or another. That afternoon felt endless. Noah tried to work but couldn't focus, kept checking his phone every 5 minutes for updates from Patricia. Claire was equally restless, starting tasks and abandoning them, her nervous energy infectious enough that even the animals seemed skittish. When Emma came home from school, she found both adults pacing in the kitchen like caged animals. What's wrong? She asked, her backpack sliding off her shoulders with concern written across her face. Nothing's wrong, baby. We're just waiting for some important news. Noah helped her out of her coat, trying to project calm he didn't feel. Good news or bad news? We hope good news. The call finally came at 6:30, just as they were sitting down to a dinner none of them had any appetite for. Noah's phone buzzed with Patricia's number, and he answered on speaker so Claire could hear. Tell me you've got good news, Noah said without preamble. I've got extraordinary news. Diane Shepard is the real deal, and her evidence is devastating. We're talking emails between Richard and Lucas discussing how to discourage Claire from staying in town. Phone records showing calls to the diner manager, the landlord, and the bank president within hours of each other. Audio recordings of Richard instructing subordinates on how to blacklist Claire from employment opportunities. And that's just what relates to Claire's case specifically. Claire had gone white, one hand pressed to her mouth. But here's where it gets really interesting, Patricia continued. Diane's got similar evidence for at least 8 other cases over the past 5 years. Different victims, same pattern, someone crosses Lucas or Richard, and suddenly their lives fall apart through a coordinated campaign of professional and personal destruction. We're not just talking about harassment anymore. This is conspiracy, potentially RICO violations if we can prove ongoing criminal enterprise. What do we do now? Noah asked. Now I contact the U.S. Attorney's Office, because this is way beyond civil litigation. We're talking federal crimes. In the meantime, I'm filing an emergency motion with Judge Morrison to freeze all communication between the Hales and anyone involved in Claire's case. No more witness tampering, no more pressure on potential testifiers. Patricia's satisfaction was audible through the phone. And I'm sending a courtesy copy to every major news outlet in the state. By tomorrow morning, this won't just be a small-town scandal anymore. This is going to be national news. After they hung up, Claire and Noah just stared at each other across the kitchen table, not quite believing what they'd just heard. Emma, sensing the shift in mood, ventured cautiously, "Was that good news?" "Yeah, baby," Noah managed, his voice rough with emotion. "That was very good news." Claire started crying, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Noah pulled her into his arms while Emma hovered nearby, uncertain, until Claire reached out and drew her into the embrace too. They stood there in the kitchen, this makeshift family that had formed in the crucible of crisis, holding each other as the weight of months of fear and uncertainty finally began to lift. "It's really over?" Claire whispered against Noah's shoulder. "They're really going to face consequences?" "It's really over," Noah confirmed, though he knew it wasn't quite true. There would still be legal proceedings, still be fallout and complications. But the battle had turned. For the first time since this started, they weren't just defending, they were winning. That night, after Emma was asleep, Noah and Claire sat on the porch watching the stars emerge in the clear autumn sky. The storm had passed, leaving everything clean and sharp-edged. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," Claire admitted, "for this to turn out to be too good to be true. Sometimes good things actually happen. Sometimes the right people come forward at the right time. Sometimes justice actually works." Noah pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and farm dirt and hope. "We did it, Claire. We stood our ground and fought back, and we won." "We haven't won yet. There's still—" "Claire." He turned her face toward his, gentle but firm. "Let yourself have this moment. Let yourself believe that maybe, finally, things are going to be okay." She nodded, leaning into him, and for the first time since the night she showed up at his gate, Noah saw her truly relax. The constant vigilance, the braced-for-impact tension that had been her default setting for months, finally started to ease. They sat there until the cold drove them inside, and Noah realized that somewhere along the way, without either of them quite noticing, the future had changed from something to survive into something to look forward to. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, media attention, legal proceedings, the slow work of rebuilding what the Hales had tried to destroy. But tonight, they had peace. They had each other. And they had hope. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The media storm hit exactly as Patricia predicted. By Thursday morning, news vans lined Main Street and reporters camped outside the County Gazette office, transforming their small Missouri town into a temporary circus of cameras and microphones. Noah watched it unfold from the relative safety of the farm. The TV in his living room showing footage of Richard Hale being ambushed by journalists outside his office building, his usual composure cracking under the barrage of questions about corruption and abuse of power. "Mr. Hale, is it true you orchestrated a campaign to destroy Claire Monroe's life?" a reporter shouted. "No comment. My lawyers will be releasing a statement." "What about the 8 other victims documented in the evidence? Do you deny targeting them as well?" Richard's face went purple with rage. But his lawyer physically steered him toward a waiting car, and they disappeared behind tinted windows. Lucas was nowhere to be seen, reportedly holed up in his apartment with his own legal team, refusing all requests for interviews. Claire stood beside Noah watching the coverage, her arms wrapped around herself. "I keep thinking I should feel triumphant or vindicated, but mostly I just feel tired." "That's normal. You've been running on adrenaline for months. Now that the immediate danger's passed, your body's finally letting you feel the exhaustion." Noah muted the TV, turning to face her fully. "Patricia says the U.S. attorney wants to meet with you next week. They're building a criminal case." "I know. She called this morning." Claire moved to the window, looking out at the farm that had become her sanctuary. "Everything's moving so fast now. 3 months ago, I was sleeping in my car wondering if I'd survive the week, and now federal prosecutors want my testimony. It doesn't feel real." Emma bounded into the room, oblivious to the heavy conversation, carrying her latest drawing. "Miss Claire, look! I made a picture of your bakery stand." Claire knelt down to examine the crayon drawing, a lopsided structure with a hand-lettered sign reading Claire's Cakes, and stick figures lined up to buy treats. "This is beautiful, sweetheart, but I haven't decided about the bakery yet." "But you said you always wanted one, and Daddy said he'd help build it, and I could paint the sign for real, not just in pictures." Emma's face fell with the particular devastation of childhood disappointment. "Don't you want to anymore?" "It's complicated, Em," Noah said gently, seeing Claire struggling with how to explain adult uncertainties to a 6-year-old. "Sometimes, even when we want something, we have to wait for the right time." "But this is the right time. The bad people are going away, and you said things would be better, and Miss Claire should get to do what makes her happy." Emma's logic was unassailable in its simplicity. Claire pulled Emma into a hug, her voice thick with emotion. "You're absolutely right. I should get to do what makes me happy. I'm just scared, I guess. Scared of putting down roots and building something when everything still feels so uncertain." "What's uncertain?" Emma asked, her face pressed against Claire's shoulder. "Whether I really belong here. Whether this is really my home or just a place I'm staying until things settle down." Noah's heart clenched. They hadn't talked about the future beyond the legal case, both of them too focused on surviving the present to plan for what came after. But Emma's innocent question had exposed the fear they'd both been dancing around. What happened when the crisis was over? When Claire no longer needed protection and Noah's farm was no longer a refuge but just a farm? Would she stay because she wanted to, or would she leave to reclaim the independence that had been stolen from her? "You belong here," Emma said, with the absolute certainty of a child who'd never learned to doubt her own perceptions. "Your family, right, Daddy?" "Right," Noah confirmed, meeting Claire's eyes over his daughter's head. "Your family, and family means you don't leave unless you want to." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I don't want to leave. I love it here. I love you both. I'm just afraid of being happy," Noah suggested gently. "Of letting yourself believe this is permanent?" "Yes, exactly that." "Then let's make it permanent." The words were out before Noah fully thought them through, but once spoken, he realized he meant them completely. "Not the bakery stand, not yet. That's your dream, and you should do it when you're ready. But you staying here, being part of this family officially. Claire Monroe, will you marry me?" Emma gasped with delight, bouncing on her toes. Claire just stared at him, her mouth open in shock. "Noah, we can't. This is too fast. We've only known each other a few months, and most of that was crisis, and I've never been more certain of anything in my life." Noah stood, crossing to where she knelt with Emma, taking both her hands in his. "I'm not asking because I think you need saving or because we've been through something intense together. I'm asking because you make me laugh, because you're the best thing that's happened to this farm in years. Because Emma lights up whenever you're in the room, and because I wake up every morning grateful that you walked up to my gate that day." He paused, then added, "I'm asking because I love you. Not the idea of you, not the convenience of you, but actually you. The real Claire who burns toast and talks to the chickens like they're people and works harder than anyone I've ever met. I want you here permanently, as my wife, as Emma's mother, as my partner in every sense of that word." Claire was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face. "This is crazy. You're supposed to date first, take things slow, make sure it's really what you want. I don't need more time to know what I want. But if you do, that's okay. We can wait. I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you." He squeezed her hands gently. "Just think about it, all right?" "I don't need to think about it." Claire laughed through her tears, the sound breaking and beautiful. "I already know my answer. It's yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I want to stay here and build a life with you and Emma. Yes to all of it." Emma shrieked with joy and launched herself at both adults, nearly knocking them over. They ended up in a tangle on the living room floor, laughing and crying and holding each other while the muted TV continued its coverage of the Hale family's downfall in the background. Later, after Emma finally calmed down enough to be distracted with a movie, Noah and Claire sat in the kitchen making plans. Real plans for a future that extended beyond the next legal hearing or the next threat from the Hales. "I want to do it soon," Claire said, her hand wrapped around a mug of coffee, the morning sunlight making her hair glow. "I don't want a big wedding or months of planning. Just us, Emma, and whoever you want to invite. Simple and real and ours. Judge Morrison would probably do the ceremony. He's been asking about you, seems genuinely pleased about how all this turned out. Noah pulled out a notepad, already making lists because that's what farmers did. They planned, they prepared. They broke overwhelming projects into manageable tasks. What about your parents? Would you want them here? Claire's expression clouded. I haven't talked to them since they moved to Arizona. They made it pretty clear they didn't want to get involved when everything happened with Lucas. But I should probably call, let them know what's been going on. Maybe they'll surprise me. And if they don't, then I've got a new family, a better one. She reached across the table, lacing her fingers through his. This is going to sound strange, but I'm almost grateful for what Lucas did. Not for the pain or the fear, but because it led me here, to you and Emma, and this life I never knew I wanted. That's not strange. Sarah used to say that sometimes the worst things that happen to us are actually redirects, the universe's rough way of pushing us toward where we're supposed to be. Noah brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. I'm grateful too. Grateful you were brave enough to ask for help. Grateful I was smart enough to say yes. The next week blurred past in a whirlwind of legal meetings and wedding preparations. Patricia reported that the federal investigation was moving faster than anticipated, with Diane Shepard's evidence providing a roadmap to years of Hale family corruption. 3 more victims had come forward, emboldened by the media coverage and the knowledge that they weren't alone. The U.S. attorney was talking about RICO charges, witness tampering, conspiracy, crimes that carried serious prison time even for wealthy defendants with expensive lawyers. Lucas was arrested on a Thursday morning, charged initially with harassment and witness intimidation, with more charges expected as the investigation continued. The footage of him being led out of his apartment in handcuffs made national news, and Noah watched it with grim satisfaction. Richard Hale was still free, his lawyers successfully arguing that he wasn't a flight risk, but his business empire was crumbling as partners distanced themselves and investigations uncovered the rot underneath the respectable exterior. Claire gave her official statement to federal prosecutors on Friday, 5 hours of detailed testimony about everything Lucas had done, everything she'd experienced and witnessed. She came home exhausted but lighter, like she'd finally set down a burden she'd been carrying for too long. They believed me, she said that night, curled up on the couch with Noah while Emma slept upstairs. Every word, every detail. They didn't question my credibility or suggest I was exaggerating. They just listened and took notes and treated me like someone who mattered. You do matter. You always did. Lucas and his father just tried to convince you otherwise. Noah pressed a kiss to her temple. Speaking of which, Judge Morrison called. He can do the ceremony 2 weeks from Saturday if that works for us. 2 weeks? Claire sat up, her eyes wide. That's so soon. Too soon? We can push it back if you need more time. No, 2 weeks is perfect. I don't want to wait. I don't want to give the universe any more opportunities to change its mind about my happiness. She kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. 2 weeks from Saturday, I become Claire Bennett. I like the sound of that. They invited 30 people to the wedding, friends, neighbors who'd supported them through the ordeal, Patricia and Helen, Deputy Jim Carson, a handful of Claire's old coworkers who'd reached out after the truth came out to apologize for abandoning her. Claire's parents declined to come. Her mother's email brief and cold, saying they were glad things worked out but didn't feel comfortable getting involved. It hurt. Noah could see that in Claire's eyes when she read the message, but she didn't let it break her. Their loss, she said, deleting the email with finality. I've got people here who actually showed up when it mattered. That's more than biology or obligation. That's real family. The wedding morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of perfect November day that made everything look sharp and defined. Emma woke up before dawn, too excited to sleep, and came bouncing into Noah's room demanding to know if it was time yet to get ready. Not quite yet, baby. Sun's not even up. But Miss Claire's going to be my real mom today. How am I supposed to sleep? Noah pulled her into bed with him, wrapping his arms around her small, warm body. You're really happy about this, aren't you? The happiest ever. I always wanted a mom, and Miss Claire is the best one I could get. She's nice, and she makes good pancakes, and she doesn't get mad when I'm loud, and she helps with homework without making me feel stupid. Emma counted on her fingers all of Claire's virtues. And she makes you smile more. You used to be sad a lot, but now you smile. She makes me happy, Noah admitted. Just like you make me happy. I'm a lucky man getting two incredible women in my life. 3, if you count Bessie the cow who's having a baby soon. Noah laughed, the sound filling the early morning quiet. You're right, 3 incredible females. I'm outnumbered. They got up and made breakfast together. Emma insisting on trying to make heart-shaped pancakes that came out more blob-shaped but were delicious anyway. Claire was staying at Mrs. Patterson's house for the night, following the old tradition about not seeing each other before the ceremony, and the house felt too empty without her. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock at the farm itself, in the south pasture where Sarah had loved to watch the sunsets. Noah had spent the previous week clearing the area, setting up chairs, stringing lights that would turn on as dusk fell. It was simple and beautiful, exactly what Claire wanted. No fuss, no pretension, just the people they cared about gathered in the place they loved. Helen Whitmore arrived early, her camera around her neck, looking almost sentimental. I've covered a lot of stories in my career, but this one's special. The woman who stood up to power and won, marrying the man who believed in her when nobody else would. That's the kind of ending people need to see. It's not an ending, Noah corrected gently. It's a beginning. Even better. Guests arrived in clusters, finding their seats, commenting on the beauty of the farm and the perfection of the weather. Patricia showed up with Judge Morrison, both of them looking pleased to be part of something joyful after months of legal battles. Deputy Carson came in uniform, looking slightly uncomfortable in the formal setting, but genuinely happy for them. And then, at exactly 2 o'clock, Mrs. Patterson's car pulled up the long driveway and Claire stepped out. Noah's breath caught in his throat. She was wearing a simple cream dress that somehow made her look both delicate and strong, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she was carrying a bouquet of wildflowers that Emma had helped gather that morning. But what really stopped his heart was the expression on her face, pure, uncomplicated joy. No fear, no hesitation, no shadow of the woman who'd shown up at his gate 3 months ago desperate and afraid. Just Claire, radiant and certain, walking toward the future they'd chosen together. Emma, serving as both flower girl and maid of honor in a role she'd insisted on, led Claire down the makeshift aisle, scattering petals with enthusiastic imprecision. When they reached the front where Noah and Judge Morrison waited, Emma took Claire's hand and placed it in Noah's with great ceremony. "Take good care of her, Daddy," she whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "She's important." "I will, baby." "I promise." Judge Morrison cleared his throat, smiling at the 3 of them. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the joining of Noah Bennett and Claire Monroe in marriage. I've known Noah since he was a boy, watched him grow into a man of integrity and strength. And I've come to know Claire over these past months as a woman of remarkable courage and resilience. Together, they're proof that even in our darkest moments, we can find light. That family isn't just blood, but choice. That love is worth fighting for, even when the odds seem impossible." Noah barely heard the rest of the traditional ceremony, too focused on Claire's face, on the way her hand trembled slightly in his, on the tears gathering in her eyes that she kept blinking back. When it came time for vows, he'd written something formal, something appropriate, but looking at her now, all those careful words fled his mind. "Claire, 3 months ago you showed up at my gate asking for help, and I made a choice to let you in. Best decision I ever made. You've brought light back into this house, laughter back into my daughter's life, and hope back into mine. You've shown me that it's possible to heal, to love again, to build something new while still honoring what came before. I promise to stand by you through whatever comes next, to be your partner and your protector, to make you laugh when you're sad and hold you when you're scared. I promise to help you build that bakery stand and paint the sign and eat too many samples. I promise to love you for exactly who you are. No conditions, no expectations, just constant and true. You're home now, Claire. You're finally, truly home." Claire's tears were falling freely now, but she was smiling through them. "Noah, I came to you with nothing, no job, no money, no hope, and you gave me everything. Not just shelter or safety, but a reason to keep fighting, a family to fight for, and the courage to believe I deserved good things. You saw me at my absolute lowest and treated me with dignity and kindness. You made me feel valuable when I thought I was worthless. You stood up for me when the whole world seemed against me. I promise to be worthy of that faith, to work hard, to love your daughter like she's mine, to build this life with you day by day. I promise to be your partner in everything, the farm work and the hard decisions, and the quiet mornings and the chaotic evenings. I promise to never take for granted what we have, and to fight for it as fiercely as you fought for me. I love you, Noah Bennett. I choose you today and every day after. There wasn't a dry eye among the guests. Even Helen Whitmore was wiping at her face while clicking photos, and Deputy Carson had turned away to compose himself. Judge Morrison's voice was thick with emotion as he concluded, "By the power vested in me by the state of Missouri, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Noah, you may kiss your bride." Noah pulled Claire into his arms and kissed her while their guests erupted in applause. Emma squeezed between them, demanding to be included in the hug, and they ended up in a three-way embrace while everyone laughed and cheered and celebrated this improbable happy ending. The reception was simple: barbecue from a local restaurant, a playlist of Sarah's favorite country songs because Noah thought she'd want to be part of this day somehow, and a cake that Emma had helped decorate with more enthusiasm than skill. As the sun set and the string lights flickered on, turning the pasture into something magical, Noah danced with his new wife while Emma spun in circles nearby, dizzy with happiness. "Thank you," Claire whispered against his chest, "for giving me this, for giving me everything. Thank you for staying, for choosing us." Noah held her tighter. "I know this has all happened fast, and maybe people will say we rushed into things, but I don't care. Life's too short to wait for perfect timing." "We earned this," Claire said fiercely. "After everything we went through, everything we survived, we earned the right to be happy." The party lasted until late, neighbors reluctant to leave, everyone wanting to extend this moment of pure joy. Finally, around 10, the last guest departed, and Noah, Claire, and Emma were alone on their farm, the family complete at last. Emma fell asleep in the truck on the short drive back to the house, worn out from excitement and dancing and eating too much cake. Noah carried her upstairs while Claire followed, and together they tucked her into bed. "Best day ever," Emma mumbled, already half asleep. "Love you, Mommy. Love you, Daddy." Claire's breath hitched at the word Mommy, spoken so naturally, like it had always been her title. She bent down and kissed Emma's forehead. "Love you too, sweetheart. Sleep well." Downstairs, with Emma safely tucked in and the house quiet around them, Noah pulled Claire into his arms in the kitchen where so much of their relationship had developed, where she'd eaten her first meal in this house, where they'd planned their legal strategy, where they'd admitted their love for each other. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Being Claire Bennett?" "It feels right. It feels like coming home after being lost for a very long time." She reached up to touch his face, tracing the lines around his eyes, the stubble on his jaw. "I keep waiting to wake up and find out this was all a dream, that I'm still sleeping in my car, still running, still alone. Not a dream, real and solid and permanent." Noah caught her hand, pressing it against his chest so she could feel his heartbeat. "You're stuck with us now, for better or worse." "I'll take the worse if it means keeping the better." They stood there in the kitchen long after they should have gone to bed, just holding each other, marveling at how far they'd come from that desperate October evening when a stranger had appeared at the gate asking for help. So much had changed. Claire had her life back, her reputation restored, her name cleared. Lucas Hale was awaiting trial on multiple felony charges. Richard Hale's business empire was under federal investigation and crumbling more every day. The people who'd turned their backs on Claire when she needed them most were calling now to apologize, to reconnect, though she was selective about who she let back into her life. And here on the farm, life had settled into a new rhythm. Still hard work, still early mornings and late nights, but softer now, warmer, filled with laughter and shared responsibility and the quiet satisfaction of building something together. The weeks turned into months, and winter settled over the farm like a blanket. Claire officially started planning her bakery stand, spending evenings sketching designs while Noah figured out the construction logistics. Emma contributed ideas with the unfiltered creativity of childhood, a a slide for customers to reach the counter, a special door for dogs. Glitter paint on everything. "We'll consider the glitter," Claire said diplomatically, making notes in her planning notebook. "But the slide might be a safety hazard." "What about the dog door?" "The dog door we can definitely do." In January, Lucas Hale pled guilty to 4 counts of witness intimidation and 2 counts of harassment in exchange for a reduced sentence. 5 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. His father, Richard, was still fighting the charges against him, but his legal team was losing ground steadily as more evidence emerged and more victims found the courage to speak up. The Hale name, once synonymous with power and influence, was now associated with corruption and abuse. Their fall was complete and very public. Claire attended Lucas's sentencing, sitting in the gallery with Noah beside her and Patricia on her other side. She'd debated whether to go, whether she needed to see him officially held accountable, and finally decided she did. Needed to look him in the eye as the judge read his sentence, needed to hear him say the words, "I'm sorry," even though they both knew he was only sorry he got caught. "Miss Monroe, would you like to make a victim impact statement?" the judge asked. Claire stood, her legs steady, her voice clear. "Your Honor, Lucas Hale tried to destroy my life because I said no to him. He used his money and his family's influence to systematically take everything from me, my job, my home, my reputation, my sense of safety. He made me feel worthless and invisible. But he failed because I refused to disappear. I refused to be silent. And because good people, my husband Noah, attorney Patricia Chen, journalist Helen Whitmore, and many others, refused to look away when they saw injustice." She turned to face Lucas directly, and he couldn't hold her gaze. "You tried to break me, Lucas, but all you did was make me stronger. I hope you spend the next 5 years thinking about that." The courtroom was silent when she sat down, and Noah took her hand, squeezing tight. After the sentence was handed down and Lucas was led away in shackles, Claire and Noah walked out of the courthouse into crisp January sunshine. Reporters shouted questions, but Patricia ran interference while they made their way to the truck. "How do you feel?" Noah asked once they were safely inside, doors closed against the chaos outside. "Free," Claire said simply. "Finally, completely free." They drove home to the farm where Emma was waiting with Mrs. Patterson, eager to show them a project she'd been working on, a model of Claire's bakery stand made from popsicle sticks and cardboard, complete with tiny clay muffins for sale. "It's perfect," Claire said, hugging Emma tight. "And you know what? I think it's time we started building the real one." Emma's shriek of joy could probably be heard in the next county. Construction on the bakery stand started in March, as soon as the ground thawed enough to dig post holes. Noah did most of the heavy work with help from neighbors who'd become genuine friends through the ordeal. Claire handled the design and finishing touches, painting the wood a cheerful yellow that Emma insisted would make people happy. The sign, true to the original promise, was Emma's handiwork, slightly crooked letters spelling out Claire's kitchen with a border of flowers and chickens. They opened for business on a Saturday in early May, offering homemade muffins, cookies, and the cinnamon rolls that had been Claire's specialty at the diner. Word spread fast, and by 9 in the morning there was a line of cars along the farm's entrance road, people coming to support Claire and sample her baking. Helen Whitmore was there, of course, taking photos for a follow-up story she was writing about triumph over adversity. Deputy Carson came and bought 6 dozen cookies for the sheriff's station. Judge Morrison showed up with his grandchildren and left with enough pastries to feed his entire book club. Even Millie, the diner owner who'd fired Claire, came to apologize in person and buy an obscene amount of muffins. "I was wrong," Millie said, her weathered face creased with genuine regret. "I let the Hales intimidate me into firing you, and I've regretted it every day since. I should have fought for you." "I'm sorry, Claire." "Thank you for saying that," Claire replied, her voice steady but kind. "I appreciate the apology. If you ever want your old job back, I've got a new job now, one that's actually mine, but thank you." By the end of the day, they'd sold out completely. Claire's feet hurt from standing, and Emma was bouncing with excitement over how many people had complimented her sign. "We did it," Emma announced, her face smudged with frosting from sampling the merchandise. "We really did it." "We really did," Claire agreed, scooping Emma up despite the 6-year-old's protest that she was too big to be carried. We built something beautiful together. That night, after Emma was asleep and the bakery stand was cleaned and prepped for the next day, Noah and Claire sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Sarah would have liked this, Noah said quietly, speaking his first wife's name comfortably for the first time since Claire moved in. The bakery stand, you being here, how happy Emma is. She'd be glad I didn't stay stuck in grief forever. Tell me about her, Claire requested, leaning against his shoulder. I want to know about the woman who raised Emma and helped make you who you are. So Noah talked, sharing memories of Sarah, her terrible singing voice, and her gift for making anyone feel welcomed and her stubborn refusal to give up even when the cancer was winning. He talked about their early years together, the dreams they'd had, the life they'd built that had been cut too short. She sounds wonderful, Claire said when he finished. I wish I could have known her. She'd have liked you. You're both fighters, both believers in doing the right thing even when it's hard. And you both loved this farm and saw its potential. Noah pulled Claire closer. I think she'd be happy I found you, happy that Emma has a mother again who loves her as fiercely as Sarah did. I do love her, both of you, more than I knew I could love anything. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged, and Noah thought about how life had a way of surprising you, how loss could eventually make room for new love, how tragedy could redirect you toward unexpected happiness, how the worst moments of your life could lead to the best ones if you were brave enough to keep going. Summer arrived, and Claire's bakery stand thrived. She hired 2 part-time employees to help manage the increasing demand and started talking about maybe expanding, maybe opening a real storefront in town. Noah encouraged her, proud of how she'd transformed from a frightened woman with nothing to a successful business owner with confidence and purpose. Emma finished first grade with straight A's and a glowing report from her teacher about her kindness and creativity. She'd told everyone at school about how her mom had fought bad people and won, turning Claire into a legend among the 6-year-old set. Richard Hale's trial concluded in July. He was convicted on 8 counts of conspiracy and corruption, sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. His business empire was dissolved, assets seized, and the Hale name that had dominated the county for 3 generations was finally, permanently brought down. Claire didn't attend the sentencing this time. She'd moved on, built a life that didn't revolve around the people who'd tried to destroy her. She learned about the verdict from a text message from Patricia, smiled with satisfaction, and went back to frosting cupcakes for a birthday party order. Is it weird that I don't feel anything? She asked Noah that evening. I thought I'd be happy or relieved or something, but I just feel nothing, like he's not even relevant anymore. That's probably the healthiest response possible, Noah said. You've moved past them. They're just footnotes in your story now, not the main plot. What is the main plot? Noah gestured around the kitchen, where Emma was doing homework at the table, where the smell of fresh bread filled the air, where the evening light came through windows that overlooked land they worked together. This, us, the family we're building, and the life we're creating. That's your story now, Claire. And it's just getting started. In August, Bessie the cow finally gave birth to a healthy calf that Emma immediately named Buttercup, despite Noah's protests that it was a boy and should have a more masculine name. Buttercup doesn't care about masculine names, Emma informed him seriously. He likes his name. He told me. The calf told you. In his eyes, Daddy. If you pay attention, you can hear what animals are saying with their eyes. Claire laughed from where she was bottle feeding the newborn. She's got a point. Buttercup it is. They stood there in the barn, the 3 of them, watching new life take its first wobbly steps, and Noah felt a completeness he'd never expected to feel again. His family was whole, his farm was thriving, and the woman he loved was right where she belonged, covered in hay and cow slobber and completely content. Fall came around again, marking a full year since Claire had first arrived at the gate. They celebrated with a quiet dinner, just the 3 of them, reflecting on how much had changed. A year ago I had nothing, Claire said, raising her glass of wine. Now I have everything. A home, a family, a business, a future. Thank you for taking a chance on me, Noah Bennett. Thank you for being brave enough to ask for help, he countered, and for staying, and for making this house feel like a home again. Can I say something? Emma asked, raising her glass of apple juice. Of course, baby. I'm glad Miss Claire came to live with us, and I'm glad the bad people went to jail, and I'm glad we're a family now. That's all. She took a solemn sip of her juice, and both adults had to blink back tears. Later, after Emma was in bed, Noah and Claire walked out to the bakery stand, now closed for the day, but still somehow cheerful in the moonlight. Claire ran her hand along the counter she'd painted, the sign Emma had lettered, the structure Noah had built with his own hands. I want to expand, she said suddenly. Not just here, but maybe open a real cafe in town. Hire more people, create jobs, give back to the community that rallied around us. She turned to Noah, her eyes bright with possibility. Is that crazy? Am I getting ahead of myself? It's ambitious, but you've never been afraid of hard work, and you've proven you can run a successful business. If that's what you want, we'll figure out how to make it happen. Noah pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. I'm proud of you, Claire. Of everything you've accomplished, everything you've overcome. You're remarkable. We're remarkable. None of this would have happened without you. We make a good team. The best team. They stood there under the stars, on the land they loved, building dreams that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. The fight was over, the bad guys had lost, and the future stretched out before them full of possibility and promise. Christmas came with snow that blanketed the farm in white, transforming everything into something magical. Emma woke up early, as children do, and dragged her parents downstairs to open presents. There were practical gifts, new boots for Noah, baking supplies for Claire, art supplies for Emma. But the best gift was the one Claire pulled out last, a small envelope addressed to both Noah and Emma. Inside was a drawing of their family, stick figures labeled Daddy, Mommy, and Emma, standing in front of a house with smoke curling from the chimney and hearts floating above their heads. At the bottom, in Emma's improving handwriting, it said, My family, the best in the world. I made it at school, Emma explained. Mrs. Carson helped me with the spelling. Do you like it? We love it, Claire said, her voice choked with emotion. It's perfect. We'll frame it and put it up in the bakery. Really? So everyone can see? So everyone can see how lucky we are. They spent Christmas Day doing nothing important, making a huge breakfast, watching movies, playing in the snow, just being together. No drama, no crisis, no threats on the horizon, just peace and love and the quiet satisfaction of having survived the storm and come out stronger. That evening, after Emma was finally asleep, exhausted from excitement and sugar, Noah found Claire in the kitchen making hot chocolate from scratch, another one of her specialties. I've been thinking about something, she said, stirring the pot slowly. About adding to our family. Noah's heart skipped. I mean, maybe, someday, if you wanted to, we could think about having a baby. I know Emma's getting older, and there's a big age gap to consider, but... She looked at him nervously. Is that something you'd want? Or is your family complete as is? Noah crossed the kitchen and wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. I would love to have a baby with you. I would love to see you pregnant and glowing, to watch Emma be a big sister, to hold our child and know we made them from love and choice and partnership. But only if that's what you want. Only if you're ready. I think I am. Or I will be soon. Claire leaned back against him. I want to build something from the ground up with you. Emma is ours in every way that matters, but I want to create life together, to have that experience with you. Then we'll start trying whenever you're ready. No pressure, no timeline. Just two people who love each other making a baby because they want to expand their family. You make it sound so simple. Maybe it is simple. Maybe after all the complicated, difficult things we've been through, we've earned something simple and beautiful. Claire turned in his arms, looking up at him with eyes full of love and trust and hope. I love you, Noah Bennett. Thank you for giving me a life worth living. I love you, Claire Bennett. Thank you for choosing to live it with me. They kissed in the kitchen, the hot chocolate forgotten on the stove, the house warm around them, and outside the snow continued to fall, covering the world in fresh possibility. The seasons turned as seasons do, and life continued its steady march forward. Claire's Cafe opened in town the following spring to great success, employing 8 people and becoming a gathering place for the community. Noah's farm had its best year ever, The combination of his hard work and Claire's business sense creating stability they'd both craved. Emma thrived, growing taller and smarter and kinder every day, secure in the knowledge that she was loved absolutely. And in the summer, Claire found out she was pregnant. They told Emma first, who reacted with appropriate amazement and immediately started planning how to teach the baby everything she knew. Noah cried, overwhelmed with gratitude and joy and the sense that his life had come full circle. From the devastation of losing Sarah to the blessing of building something new with Claire. The pregnancy was healthy and uncomplicated, and on a cold February morning, Claire gave birth to a baby boy they named James Matthew Bennett, carrying on Noah's family tradition while honoring Claire's father. Emma held her baby brother with exaggerated care, whispering promises to protect him and teach him important things like how to draw and which chicken was the mean one. Noah held his son and his wife and watched his daughter fuss over her new sibling, and felt a peace so profound it was almost painful. This was what happiness looked like, not the absence of hardship, but the presence of people worth fighting for. Not perfection, but progress. Not forgetting the past, but honoring it while building something new. They were a family, complicated and beautiful, and entirely their own. Born from crisis, but sustained by choice, strengthened by struggle, but defined by love. And as Noah stood in the hospital room with his whole world contained in this one space, he thought about the night Claire had shown up at his gate, desperate, afraid, asking for help from a stranger who could have so easily turned her away. Best decision he'd ever made, letting her in. Best decision she'd ever made, staying. And together, they'd built something neither could have imagined alone. A home, a family, a future worth believing in. The road had been hard. The battles had been real. The cost had been high. But they'd paid it gladly for this moment, this life, this love that had bloomed in the least likely circumstances and grown into something unshakable. Claire looked up at him, their newborn son in her arms, Emma leaning against her side, and smiled. "We did it, Noah. We really did it. We really did," he agreed, kissing her forehead, "and we're just getting started." Outside the hospital window, the sun was rising over a new day, full of possibility and promise. And in that room, the Bennett family, every member chosen with intention, loved with ferocity, held together by bonds stronger than blood, faced the future together, unafraid and unbreakable. They had fought for each other, stood by each other, and built a life that honored both the past and the present. They had turned crisis into family, strangers into soulmates, and fear into unshakable faith. This was their story, imperfect, hard-won, and beautifully, completely real. And it was far from over.